Good evening, councillors. As is our custom at present, I invite you to a few moments contemplation. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, members, as ever, our first agenda item, I note on my sheet there's no update on it, so it's not changed, so I can still read from the same piece of paper. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the back stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. And hope it doesn't get too cold whilst you're there. Right. Do we have any apologies for absence? Councillor Marks.
Councillor Donnell is on the M3, but which bit of the M3 we're not fully sure just at the moment.
Sorry. He may well arrive, but then again, yes. Moving, no others, sorry. It looks like a... Oh, sorry.
Apologies from Councillor Tomlin. Thank you.
Thank you. He's stuck on the M6 then, no doubt. I think he's in Manchester. So, yeah. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Finney?
Non-pecuniary interest in respect of the Anvil Trust as far as it relates to the budget this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Finney. Councillor Leake?
Exactly the same.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Jones.
I've been asked to tell you, Mr. Mayor, that there's no declaration of interest in the paper, but if there's any discussion on Many Down or BasingstokeGov Club, I have an interest, so I'll be leaving. That's what I've been told to say. Okay.
I'm glad you're so obedient on this occasion. On this occasion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only in terms of reference to the budget, any reference to museums, so Willis Museum, Milestones, Hampshire Museum and Galleries Trust, I do have an interest in that.
Thank you. If you indicate at the time, I might forget all these. I think we've got the lot now, yes? Thank you, members. So item 4, to confirm the minutes of the last meeting. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe that the minutes of our last meeting is correct, and I direct your attention to page 3573 to minute 7, item 7(2) on that agenda. The minute records that we noted the report, but of course we also received an apology from Councillor Finney, and I think for completeness it should be recorded in the minutes.
Certainly there was an apology. I think this matter has sort of been, how shall I say, in the air. The feeling was that as there was not a formal resolution in that direction, that's why they're not here. But I agree that it was something of substance and importance that took place in the meeting, and therefore it should be recorded. Yes, Councillor Baker.
Do I take that, Mr. Mayor, as yes?
Yes. Yes, yes.
Fine. I will say no more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was just explaining one of the reasons why it wasn't there. It had been considered, it seems, and deemed probably not the right way to do it, but I'm accepting your request that it be there. Any other points on the minutes? So with that small amendment, can I accept it as a correct record? Thank you. I think I heard agreed, muttered very quietly, but nonetheless, we'll take it as affirmed. Right, to receive announcements from the Mayor and Chief Executive. Right, the announcements this time are of a slightly different nature because basically lots has been going on in terms of my engagements and so on, but I'm not going to go through a list of them. I am, however, going to explain why in the course of the next few days or a couple of weeks, you may see in our entrance lobby of Dean's a rather colourful giraffe. It's not live. No, it is a giraffe. In fact, he's called Reg. He has a name, and I think the name comes from something like recycled environmental giraffe, hence Reg. And he has been constructed by a student, Madeline Sly, at Harriet Costello, or wait a minute, Costello College, is it these days? Costello College, I get the name right. Although they've gone back to be, no, sorry, they're not a college anymore. They told me that it's part of their becoming an academy. They had reverted from a college to a school, which I found a delightful move. As I say, this particular artist has produced this giraffe, and it was on display in an art exhibition by the pupils at Harriet, which is no longer called at all, so I'll say Costello, at the Willis Museum. And it was a really fantastic exhibition, and I felt the giraffe in particular deserved a wider publicity, so that's why Reg was going to be there. Beyond that, I'm just going to tell you that as I approach the final furlong of my mayoralty, don't all cheer, that there are quite a lot of charity events forthcoming because we want to finish up with a nice chunky fund. And I hope you've all got your pencils ready to note that there's a charity Zumba being promoted by my beloved on the 20th of February. That will be taking place at the Viables. Will be great fun. It's during the day, and for those people who might have babysitting problems, it's during half term. There will be a creche available. Charity bowling, I believe there's a couple of teams being put together. 27th of February at the Bowlplex. You know that's a fantastic event, great fun, good value, loads of food, all for a mere, I think it is £7. And if you're a guest there not taking part in the bowling, it's only £3. Charity lunch on the 28th of February. We've already had one. This is the second one. Fantastic restaurant down at Beacott. If you've not been, it's about time you went just to know what's going on in our town. It's been recently refurbished. The food is prepared by the students to a fantastic standard. They're quite good at aiming the peas to the plate, and they're generally very committed to doing a good job, and it's socially a lovely event, so do take that into account. 28th of February, that is. Starts at something like 7, but Debbie has all these details. We're having an arts festival at the Centre Court, now called Hampshire Court Hotel, on the weekend 31st of March, 1st of April. This has come about, I mentioned this because the Mayoress and I have visited so many arts and groups throughout the borough. We, A, didn't know there were quite so many. B, we didn't know the fantastic standard to which they work. It is really amazing, both young people and not so young people. And we felt that it would be nice to have them all come together in one mega show. And that's taking place at the Hampshire Court and is certainly being enthusiastically followed by the arts groups. Whether there'll be any punters, we'll still have to see, but it sounds as though it's going to be really good because of the talent that will be on display. So I do urge you to give that a go. As I say, that's the 31st of March, 1st of April. Again, further details from Debbie. Charity Dinner Dance, that's a regular thing. We have it every year, and this one will be at least as good as all the rest. I hope, David, yours was brilliant. I have to say I enjoyed it there, and this we hope to match that quality. That's the 13th of April. And the very last thing is a show at the Anvil, 5th of May. We're calling it the Basingstoke in the Mix, and it's a multicultural show, but involving both multicultural acts and lots of young people. And we hope that will be a stunning success. Tickets, very reasonable. I think they were about 16 quid we decided in the end, but very reasonable. Again, all to the Mayor's Charities, and I hope you will attend all of them, but if you can't manage all of them, at least some of them. Thank you very much for indulging me in that small publicity stunt, but the money's for a good purpose. Thank you very much. Mr. Chief Executive, nothing. So we will race on to the public participation, where I think we have a long-standing friend by now. Except I'm not finding the bit of oh no, that's sorry, that's the public participation, which we have none. Sorry, revise that. Moving then on to resignations and appointments. Right, what about committees? Do we have any changes on the committees? Wow, I like that. How about then outside bodies? If you have any nominations for outside bodies where there are vacancies, let me find my page, but take them one by one, please. Do we have any before I bother opening them? Nobody wish to do any nominations? In that case, I won't try to find the page. Thank you. Great. Steaming ahead here. So that does bring us to petitions, and that's where we do have one on indoor youth skate park from Daniel O'Loughlin. And I think we have seen him before. Where are you, Daniel? Please come forward, and I presume you would like to say a few words in support of your petition. You're not obliged to, but if you wish to, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So my name is Daniel O'Loughlin. I am the chair for the Basingstoke Youth Movement. I brought with me today a folder with me with some information that I want to pass on to officers and members. We've got about 350 signatories of young people across Basingstoke and Dean. Obviously, it's a bit misleading in the title. We've obviously put, it says, building a indoor skate park. But it's a bit more complex, and I know I've only got 2 minutes to come across. In October, we had a meeting with our group, and again in November, and we looked at quite a lot regarding the youth strategy that had been made by the administration here at Basingstoke and Dean, and we pulled it apart quite rigorously as a group. And there was 3 things that kind of came out of that, and that was having things to do, getting to places, having a say, safer communities. And they were kind of the main things that came out of that as a group. And there's quite a lot of other ideas that came around as well. And more we talked about it, the more and more we looked at what we were missing in Basingstoke was some sort of communal hub for young people of the borough. We are quite fragmented as a borough. We have the Basingstoke, then we have individual areas within that, and then outside Basingstoke, which is completely isolated from the community within the more urbanised areas. We also started communication with work with the BVS team and the community development team of officers here in the council building, and again we're finding more and more fragmentation with the groups. In December we contacted an organisation called Ed Barnes Skate Park, who had been developing one of the South East England's largest skate parks in Reading that had recently fallen through, and since then they have actually started actively looking in the Basingstoke area for a possible site and venue as a private entity. We then, in December, decided to support their efforts to try and build this in Basingstoke. And in turn then, as a group, we had many good ideas revolving around social enterprises and various other aspects as well. We are then looking to now speak to members and obviously to the council. We have set forth a plan in motion where we want to try and raise funds, not to be supporting this commercial enterprise. They've got their own funds and their own ability to fund themselves, but to look at developing around some social community ventures within that. So we are keen tonight to pass on over, and obviously I'm very happy to see some members have actually signed our petition across the group. I also make special mention to Kathy Ostleton, the youth portfolio holder. We'd like to say thank you for helping us develop links with some of the BVS team and the community development officers. And finally, as well, we've only got a few members here tonight, but one big thing that we've came out of this, we're quite surprised, was the amount of support for this from young people outside of Basingstoke, who quite often would want to get involved with many of the activities BVS do, but because of their very nature, always moving around the borough, and because of the transport problems young people again and again are having. Tonight's a good example. We're meant to have 10 people with us today, but due to some bus issues, there's only 3 of us. They are very keen, and they said themselves, if it was an essential location, they would come on in. So thank you for your time, and thank you.
Thank you. I imagine one day you might well join the benches here on the council, and we might be a bit stricter on the time then. But nonetheless, what you were saying was interesting, so it's easier to stretch it. Thank you for your input there, and we'll be passing that to the portfolio holder, Councillor Still. Thank you. So, colleagues, that brings us on to agenda item 9, proposals for the policy and budget framework and the council plan. I mentioned both in the same breath because we shall conduct a debate as usual on both those items together and then have a vote separately, separate votes, but the debate will be on everything. And I will now use my prerogative to suspend standing orders in order that, as has traditionally been the case, the group leaders can speak without time constraint. I hope not too much advantage will be taken of that, but it's there for you. After the group leaders have spoken and the independent coordinator, we will then revert to standing orders where there will be the usual 5-minute time limit. So with that, I call upon the leader of the Conservative group to put forward his thoughts on the topic. As it's the leader of the council and the leader of the Conservative group, you can take whichever you want as the pace is your speech.
That's taken up at least sort of 5 minutes of my half an hour I was going to allocate to the speech, but never mind. Mr. Mayor, I don't think there's anybody in this chamber who wants to see Basingstoke and Dean as a worse place to live. We may disagree sometimes on how to achieve our aims, but we all, I think, share a common purpose, which is to make sure that our residents have a high quality of life, good jobs, and a prosperous future, both for themselves and for their families. To do that, we have to plan to move forward. Much as some might like it to be otherwise, we cannot put a wall around the borough and pretend that we can cut ourselves off for the social and the economic pressures that affect everyone else. There are plenty of other towns and districts around us working very hard to take away our businesses, to take away our prosperity, and to make the facilities and services that we enjoy today no longer sustainable. And that is not scaremongering, it's just the simple fact this is a very competitive world we live in. So we have a choice. Either we look positively forward, creatively, ambitiously, trying to build a brighter future by bringing in new innovations, new opportunities, and renewing and revitalizing older features that are no longer fit for purpose. Or we pull up the drawbridge. We say, enough is enough. Let's concentrate on today. Let's put a stop to change. Let's spend our reserves on fixing short-term problems and then watch as the borough gradually declines into the ranks of the has-beens, where services are inadequate but council tax is high because all the money is gone. Now, where have I heard that statement before? where jobs are few and far between, and where no one wants to live. And before you say that could never happen, just reflect on the impression that will be given to outside investors, both private and public, if new businesses are cold-shouldered, housing sites are opposed everywhere, even on brownfield land. Why should they want to come and invest where some people seem to be so keen to show they're not wanted? And of course, without new investment, whether it's industrial, commercial or residential, there will be no Section 106, no likelihood of government or LAP's funding, and no community infrastructure levy, no SIL, and upon which we will have to rely so heavily to provide many of the facilities and improvements that will benefit residents in the future. That is why the council plan that I am proposing this evening, whilst recognising that there are immediate issues that have to be dealt with, is very much a plan for the future that demonstrates that there is every reason why Basingstoke is the place to invest. Our economy is vital. Thriving businesses bring jobs and prosperity. That is why we are continuing to allocate significant funds to regenerate Basingview as a really green business hub equipped with the latest in superfast broadband. The project to revive the top of the town is underway to ensure it adds to the interest and complements the style of the malls and festival place as a shopping destination of choice for a wide area around us. And you can already see the steelwork coming out of the ground for the new air kicks facility at the leisure park, bringing a major new feature to our leisure offering. So the foundations are being laid for future economic growth. But as well as jobs, our residents need to have the chance of a home where they want to live. Whether we like it or not, the birth rate is rising, and people are living longer. The population in the borough is growing year by year, and we have to provide housing to meet the increasing demand. That is why we have to have a local plan that will effectively meet housing need, but does not lead to mile after mile of urban sprawl determined at random on appeal by developers, creating communities with no heart and no facilities, with poor access and with increased pressure placed on existing localities. And that means we cannot simply afford to say no to any development close to us. Nor does it mean we can dump it all on Manydown. Residents across the borough were very clear that was not what they wanted to see, so there will have to be compromise. But let's be very clear, appropriate infrastructure has to come with new housing, not after it. We have allocated £750,000 of funding in the budget for the master planning and promotion of Manydown to ensure infrastructure needs are scoped to be an intrinsic part of the plan for that area. But equally, we have to give the same attention to the requirements of communities to the north, the south and the east to ensure that there are the plans for schools, shopping, surgeries, etc. that will be needed there, as well as improved road links, both for housing and for business. But there is, of course, little point in planning for the future unless there's also a plan to deal with the issues of today. Consistently uppermost in residents' minds is the desire to feel safe at home and on the streets of the borough. Over the last 7 years, crime and antisocial behaviour has fallen steadily in the borough until today it stands at an all-time low. The Streets Youth Initiative, which was developed by our officers here in the borough, is now being used nationally by the Home Office as an exemplar of a successful way to involve young people and to keep them from getting into trouble. We will maintain that level of commitment going forward, but through closer working with neighbouring community safety teams, will increase the efficiency and effectiveness of community safety in Basingstoke and Deane. Now, one of the causes of antisocial behaviour, and certainly a major irritant to those affected by it, is overcrowded parking in residential areas. And this actually is not just a problem associated with Basingstoke town. It affects rural areas as well. And this point was clearly made in the resident survey carried out last autumn. We are therefore responding to residents by doubling the budget so that more than £1 million will be spent over the next 4 years on parking and access schemes. Equally important is the environment itself. We have increased the amount of waste that is recycled with the introduction of curbside glass collections. Pilot projects to reduce energy consumption have also begun, but we do need to do more. That is why we are setting aside £1 million from our reserves as an initial investment in projects that will reduce energy use and introduce renewable energy both for our own premises and the borough as a whole. One thing will not change, however. Weekly bin collections will stay. Now, no one would pretend that the current economic climate does not make life more difficult for many of us. What we have to do is to deal with the practical difficulties that some may experience locally, and in particular, ensuring that everyone can have the chance of a roof over their head must be a priority. We recognise that the changes that will take place in the benefits structure over the coming years necessitate a period of transition that some may find hard to cope with. That is why we are creating a £500,000 community support fund to be used, working in conjunction with other agencies and organisations in the voluntary sector, to tackle any problems of housing, homelessness or readjustment that occur. Equally, this is a difficult time for the Council itself. Grant is likely to be reduced by 36% over the planned period. We have identified 2.2 million of savings to cushion the impact and to release funding for other priorities, but the various changes in business and council tax funding also carry significant risk with them. We have therefore taken a conservative and prudent approach during this period of change and provided specific reserves to cover identified downside risks should they become a reality. Nevertheless, this plan still delivers a balanced budget for the next 2 years while making no increase in council tax. That will be 5 years in a row that council tax for this borough will not have changed under a Conservative administration. The plan which I recommend to council tonight balances immediate needs with delivering essential long-term projects. It recognises inescapable financial pressures, but has the ambition to set in motion new initiatives so that, by creative and constructive use of our resources, we can deal both with the problems of today and deliver a prosperous and thriving borough in 5, in 10, in 20, and even in 50 years' time. This is already a great place to be and in which to do business. I want this borough to be an exceptional borough in which to work and live, and I want it to be so, not just for us now, but for our children and for our children's children. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. Councillor Laura James, please, for the Labour Party.
That was a speech, Mr. Mayor, full of warm words from a council leader, but we know the Conservative administration has a record of talking lots and doing little. This is a do-little budget from a do-little administration which is on its last legs, devoid of ideas and drive to tackle and solve the issues our residents face. The Tories have performed so many U-turns recently, they've got themselves into quite a spin. And to be honest, Mr. Mayor, there is no way they can spin themselves out of the mess they've created. The test of any budget, the mark of any council plan, is whether it makes a difference to people's lives. With people facing very tough times, choosing whether to heat their homes or to put food on the table, whether they can pay the mortgage or the rent, afford childcare or care for their elderly relatives, with no growth, high unemployment, and a real need for a plan B. The choices people face could not be starker today. This budget fails the people of Basingstoke. To tell 4,000 working households that they just need to budget better reinforces utterly how out of touch the Tories really are. Such a careless language. On this side of the chamber, we have all put forward motions this last year on issues we know that people care about, motions that the Tories have voted down. It is we on this side of the chamber that understand. It is we on this side of the chamber that have ideas and drive to tackle the problems Basingstoke faces. It is time for this tired, old, unlawful and exhausted administration to step aside. We are the 5th richest council in the country. With roughly 350 million in assets, this council can make a difference to help our communities through these hard times. But that means investing that money properly. It takes bold decisions to look for the best returns, both financially and socially, and the Tories have not invested properly, and they have lost this council hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds in poor decisions. You can balance any budget if you cut enough out of it, and this is a budget that has led to millions of pounds of cuts, which hurt the most vulnerable in our community. We have over 25 years' worth of council tax in a bank account, just wasting away, losing money year on year, £400,000 in interest lost this year, on top of the losses in interest last year and the year before. It's like someone is sat in the council offices setting light to £5 notes, one after the other, all year round. We have 220 million in property assets. We have 134 million in reserves. A council in this position should not be proud to announce cuts, should not be proud to see the worst off in our community suffering. It should not be proud of reducing expenditure on the CAB or our community schools. And the cuts in this budget are not just for this year. The medium-term financial forecast sees the further cuts in income and services for the next 5 years. This is simply Tory financial mismanagement on a grand scale. While the Tories incorrectly tweet about the success of a 0% council tax for 5 years, people should read the small print and the 2% council tax increase the Tories have built into the budget for 2015. At the same time, as we see the worst cuts and the biggest falls in income, the Tories are planning to put even more money away into their rainy day reserves. The Tories may not have noticed, but it's pouring. We now have reserves for reserves. More money that will be misinvested, more money that will be stashed away in bank accounts, more money that should be invested in the people of Basingstoke and this council, if this council was managed better. It is a disgrace that Sentinel, one of our key partners, had to go to the city to raise 75 million to build homes, paying an interest rate that is greater than 2% return we make on our reserves. We should have built socially rented housing with our partners and got a better return on our investment, both socially and financially. Is it right that the Anvil Trust receives 49% of all the grant monies this council hands out? That's an increase of 46% last year. That's a bigger slice of a smaller cake. That's 1.1 million of the Tories. It's 1.1 million that the Tories are giving to the Anvil this year, as well as the 266,000 more in rent subsidy, while the rest of the budget, some 1.2 million, is spread over 48 other organisations. At the same time, County has found an additional £140,000 on top of its base grant for the next 2 years for the Anvil. So the County are giving the Anvil over £300,000 over 2 years. In this same budget, the Tories are proposing a 5th year of cuts to the CAB grant. I hope members take time to look at the annual report of the CAB and see the level of casework that they are dealing with, and more importantly, to look closely at what kind of issues people are facing. It beggars belief that they are being cut again. The number of CAB clients increased by 16% last year. The CAB predict that the changes to the benefit system this April will increase this further. When we consider the money that this council has been given from various places, which the Tories have done nothing with. Take the top of town, £100,000 to improve the area. Not one penny spent. Many small businesses have gone under, a loss to this town, while that money has sat in this council's bank account, and they have left us with empty shops. We want to see the top of town designated with a special rates and rent zone. The council should ease the burden of rents and rates on small businesses and to help keep them afloat through Osborne's triple dip recession. The council is sitting on nearly £1 million of affordable housing, and yet another reserve. As yet, it hasn't spent one penny. But the number of affordable homes completions in the borough has dropped to a record low. On average, income of families on housing register is just £15,000. Of the 10,000 CAB clients last year, 4,500 earned less than £1,000 per month. 31 new affordable units were delivered last year. That's just 10% of the affordable housing target. Meanwhile, we have seen an 86% increase in households in bed and breakfasts. We have seen a 250% increase in rough sleepers. The housing register continues to rise. The use of bread and breakfast continues to increase, and we are waiting nervously for the impact of the welfare reforms changes in April. There is not enough stock available to house those most in priority. There is a real and pressing social housing crisis in Basingstoke. Official figures show that the number of housing benefit recipients has risen by 42% between November 2008 and August 2012 in the borough. That's from 7,000 households to 9,500 households. The average across the other 10 Hampshire districts is 26% increase in recipients over the same period. So why is Basingstoke so different? What have the Tories done about it? 90% of those 10,000 households who also receive council tax benefit, most are working, and they need that help to top up low wages and keep their roof over their heads. They're not scroungers, and they're not unworthy. They are people who need this council to understand their position and to help them get through this recession. This council is not even collecting the debts owed to it by other authorities. Hampshire still owes us £4.5 million for their share of Manydown, and nowhere is it accounted for in this budget, but we are told it will be paid back next year. In fact, it's in the county's budget to be approved tomorrow. So why isn't it accounted for in this budget tonight? Last year, this council turned down 41 people for discretionary housing payments who were in crisis. This council creates a budget of £114,000 to help people in housing crisis and spent just £65,000 of it. Why? Well, the report says that the underspend of £30,000 will be carried over ahead of the welfare reform changes coming next April. The new £500,000 community support budget and the £45,000 extra for the rent deposit scheme are all about this council preparing for the welfare crisis which is looming large in this April. But this is the same council that has cut back on the housing department and just weeks later have had to take on more staff and are still advertising for more staff in preparation for this coming April to cope with the housing crisis we now face. This is not a strategic approach, it's a chaotic panic. And to make matters worse, the council still doesn't know how the welfare changes will impact on people. It's a mess. But the Tories actually sat there before Christmas and told us all that they couldn't afford to find £14,000 to hold the council tax discount scheme in place for another year. But now they can suddenly find £600,000 to try to mitigate the impact of the welfare reforms that they haven't yet assessed. As yet, there is no line in the budget for what happens next year to the council tax discount scheme. Another area that deserves scrutiny is the number of consultants this council are now employing after cutting back on experienced and qualified staff. We make redundant our most experienced electoral services officer, only then to have to employ a consultant for some £20,000. We don't have in-house expertise anymore for projects like the leisure park, top of town, or simply managing our property portfolio. So this council now proposes to fork out £635,000 in additional consultants' fees. And yet, let's not forget the £75,000 for another attempt to sell Parklands and possibly relocate the council to a new set of offices. Is this really a priority for this council? Do the Tories have plans for these offices? Is it housing we're going to see on this site? And the Tories are scrapping the staff canteen to save money. At the same time, they've had to shell out for new kitchens all over the campus. Interestingly, on Friday, I saw all the ground staff coming together in our canteen for breakfast, discussing their week, their work, and just coming together as a team in our canteen. Blue and white collar workers meeting together. It is so wrong that this has been taken away in the name of savings in this budget. I was very interested in the Green Investment Reserve that is being created, yet another pot of money in a reserve with a different heading but with no plans on how it is going to be spent, rather than a well thought through, costed programme of green investment. Again, the Tories are at it, creating reserves and pots of money to grab a headline but with no substance. Before Christmas, we proposed a motion on tackling the real issues residents face in parking. The Tories claim they're increasing the budget by £500,000, but a closer look shows that the increase is over 4 years. And in the first year, this year, there is in fact a reduced spend. Wow, that's what I call tackling a priority. I must admit, I had a good laugh at the idea of this council spending money on a River Loddon water gauging system, after the same Tories are about to develop the Loddon Valley and Chinham, out of all recognition. At least we'll be able to chart the demise of the River Loddon. And that brings me, Mr. Mayor, to the judicial review and the cost of the High Court judgment, all of which are cleverly accounted for. The final settlement figure paid to Menidan Company was £190,000. It's been suggested that the cost of the defence was £40,000 and the rest. The cost of the aborted quashed core strategy process and the cost of the Tories' irrational, unlawful actions is not just financial, it's the 100% increase in development they are proposing on greenfields around Basingstoke. What makes the decision of the Chief Executive and the leader of the Council to defend the JR even more a bridge too far is the door it has opened to developers to challenge the Council ahead of any new local plan being adopted. Every appeal, every cost associated with our communities defending themselves in a vacuum created by the Tories' unlawful actions is a cost not just in money, but bad, unplanned development that never needed to be in the first place. We have no confidence in the Tory administration. Our core values are those of fairness, social justice, equal chances in life for everyone. We want publicly run local services of high quality, delivered by an open and transparent council that makes customer service and helping the most vulnerable a priority. We want a cooperative council focused on people, ethical and involving. Cooperative values can shape the way we rebuild our local economy, putting long-term social benefit ahead of short-term private gain. We want investment and income generation to be priorities, but not at the expense of sound community values. We want intelligent investment and public good generated by public-owned assets and money of our borough, instead of this council simply acting like a bank or a property company, and a pretty poor one at that. We will apply for our cooperative and mutual values to get the best return and most benefit to our residents and local economy. We would build homes either by direct capital investment or enabling funds for housing associations and preferred partner developers to deliver what our residents need. We would establish 2 pilot schemes, one rural and one urban, for a community land trust. When it comes to regeneration of existing housing stock, we would look very closely at land deals to secure the best low-density development and to deliver socially rented housing. We want regeneration to be as much about the physical environment, green space, and the whole community as about housing that is actually built. Planning should be able to evaluate each development proposal in light of community objectives and priorities. We need to be precise in the strategic picture of need, realistic in what infrastructure is needed, and in the future shape of our town and borough. We would fundamentally change how the council delivers planning. We would, through our tenancy strategy and vulnerable persons protocol, work with our preferred partners to ensure that thousands of people affected by the housing benefit cuts, under occupancy and the welfare changes are supported, and that they avoid evictions and homelessness at all costs. Families across the borough are grappling with falling living standards and the rising costs. Whether it's because of the cuts in welfare support, unemployment, or increases in fuel and food prices, people are suffering from this recession. Austerity has gone mad. Whether it's the green agenda, jobs, welfare, housing, or our neighbourhoods, we have the ideas and the drive on this side of the chamber. The people of Basingstoke have a choice. More of the same old Tories, same old do little, bad financial management, and a lack of any priority from a tired and exhausted administration, or a new fresh start with people who know that working together we can do more, solve more, deliver more, and make a difference. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Gavin James, leader of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Good evening, Mayor. I will try. As is customary, Mr. Mayor, I'll start with the council plan. And credit to the leader. He's reduced the number of pointless statements like making our streets safer, as if anywhere in the country there's a council trying to make them more dangerous. But once removed, we end up with a much shorter council plan. When you read the report, the Cabinet report introducing the council plan, it promises to highlight the achievements of this administration. I got very excited. I turned straight away thinking I'd missed something. These highlights tell you all you need to know about the Conservatives. It talks of the Welcome to Air Kicks facility, as if it was down to this Cabinet that of the many large towns between Southampton and Reading, with a mainline railway station and connection with the M3, they chose us because of something the Cabinet did. I'm not convinced in his time of office the leaders had any influence over the location of Basingstoke-on-Deane, but at a push we could give him some credit for that one. After that, I'm struggling. According to his achievements, we have 18,000 listed buildings. Well done, Clive. But you may find they were around a bit before you were. And yes, Mr. Mayor, among your council's achievements this year, amongst your achievements,
Councillor James, I think I have a point of... I have not invited other speakers, but it's noted. Do continue, Councillor James.
Thank you, Mayor. Among your council's achievements in the last year was Highclere Castle. Well done. And of course, the council has kept the weekly bin collection. This is actually a downgrade. It used to be we've saved the weekly bin collection. I've been in this chamber for 5 years and I've never worked out what they saved it from, because no one in this chamber has ever mentioned getting rid of the weekly bin collection. So they've saved it from something. It could be a disease, a virus, I don't know. But
Forgive
there
me
we go.
for interrupting your flow. I appreciate there's a lot of enthusiasm to join in the debate. Can we sort of wait to put our bid in? We've already got a long list, and I want to listen to what Councillor James is saying, not look around the room. So as soon as the leader of the council puts the motion on the table after our various presentation by the group leaders, then I'll start taking further names. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Question of understanding. You weren't taking bids to speak, and yet you've got a long list. Can I understand why I was somehow inappropriately putting my hand up? And who were there on, how did the others get on the long list? Thank you.
Well, yes, okay. Carry on, Councillor James.
Mr. Mayor, he had a point, but I'm not sure it's a point of order. To summarise the council's achievements is easy. This authority has emptied the bin, kept the borough in roughly the same location, and not accidentally lost any castles. If he's happy to claim achievements for things that he has not had any responsibility over, I could have suggested some more up-to-date information that we can all celebrate, such as 5,050 residents or low incomes have been taken out of income tax completely thanks to coalition tax policies. 84,200 individuals on medium to low incomes have seen their tax bill cut by £600 a year. That's £1,200 a year for a family. Hampshire schools have benefited from more than 28 million thanks to the pupil premium. That's £600 for every child from a disadvantaged background, helping them achieve their full potential. He could have mentioned that the number of young people unemployed has dropped by a third in the borough, around 200 lower than its peak under Labour. The number of residents on an apprenticeship has doubled since 2010, and I checked, 21.6% increase in engineering, so it matters to you. I know these are Lib Dem policies, but the Conservatives have helped us deliver them, and Labour tried to block them. In fact, Mr. Mayor, using Labour's own measure, child poverty has dropped 20% since 2010. That's something we can all celebrate. Beyond that, it's most interesting to see what's dropped out of the council plan. Who remembers the right homes in the right places? It's not there anymore. It doesn't need to be. After years of meetings and studies, the council set the number of homes required at about 750. Why didn't anyone think of that before? The Lib Dems did advocate that number in 2004, twice in 2006, in 2007, 2008, 2009, twice in 2010, at least 3 times in 2011, and also in 2012 on more than one occasion. But apart from that, no one mentioned it. It's a good job they didn't put out loads of leaflets last year saying they were building 594 homes a year. Or apparently they did. Oops. And the right place turned out to be many down. What a good idea. Apart from, well, everyone, no one had thought of it. Sadly, 6 years of posturing and pretending has cost the Loddon Valley any chance of survival in this local plan. We've left it too late to build the bulk of our new homes needed in one well-planned development. The Tories tried to pretend they could avoid developing east of the town. They pretended they could avoid developing west of the town. The rest of us had to sit on the sidelines to see which community they would let down. We underestimated them. The Conservatives have managed to let both communities down. That's some achievement, but it wasn't mentioned in their achievements on the back of the council plan. We did, of course, achieve an accolade few councils receive, a prize so hard to get that no council even tries to get one. And this administration got one. Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have a High Court order. It didn't feature in our last council plan, and unsurprisingly, again, not mentioned in the achievements. Mr. Mayor, I can't support the council plan. You can tell it's from this cabinet. It basically says we're already doing it, but there's very little we've actually done it. I can be a bit kinder on the council budget. Additional money for residential parking and diversifying our investments to include green projects and monies, as yet unallocated, on smoothing the benefit transition, demonstrate that this administration has developed the ability to listen. It started when they lost their majority, but I'll put that down to coincidence. Sadly, Mr. Mayor, people will say your leader is weak, he's doing U-turns, he's lost direction. If he hadn't made these changes, they'd say he's arrogant and he doesn't listen. I will congratulate the leader. Ignoring half the chamber is ignoring half the wisdom and half the ideas. In this chamber, we have the three modern political ideologies. We have conservatism, we have liberalism, and we have opportunism. And we should make use of all of them. These improvements, however, fail to hide the direction of travel. This obsession with freezing council tax and the belief that a good council does less. Already the council budget talks of further efficiency savings to balance the books. Some will wonder after some 7 years of Conservative administration that they're admitting they still spend money inefficiently. But of course, it's not the case. I described the difference between efficiency saving and cut in my last speech last year. And efficiency saving is delivering the same level and standard of service for less cost. We're not doing that. In conversations I've had about piloting local decision making or organising Basingstoke Live or speeding up the delivery of better residential parking schemes, I get a common response. We don't have the resources. If you wonder why this council plan lasts 4 years rather than 3, it's because we don't have the resources to deliver it in 3. If you're wondering why it's 4 pages rather than 8, we didn't have resources for the other 4 pages. We are on a journey to the Tory utopia, a council that meets once every 7 years to award a contract for someone else to empty the bins, weekly. We even hope we can avoid that once we've agreed joint working with 20 other authorities so our bin collecting regime can be decided by the commissioning committee in Wokingham. Last year I joked we were following in the footsteps of the county council, who were so busy doing less they've had to recruit an extra cabinet member to achieve it. And follow them you did. In 2011, the Lib Dems called for an investment in renewable energy. If it jogs your memory at all, the Tory spokesman at the time, who was keen on a career in banking, described our proposals as being reckless with someone else's money. That was hard to take. A 10 million investment then would now be delivering a net revenue of £1 million a year to fund our services. A stronger events team to develop our festival without harming Basingstoke Live. Enough to bridge the council tax benefits gap forever. Grant funding to support local projects dreamt up by the community. And yes, this year we could have even reduced council tax. You can see the problem, Mr. Mayor. The Cabinet have been laughing at my proposals and implementing my jokes. So instead we head for a fiscal cliff, building in efficiency savings that don't exist and heads of service savings which mean cuts. And if you glance a few years into the future, more identified cuts are needed to balance the books. I have little sympathy with your budget position, a 6-year flawed strategy of cuts, cuts and cuts. We're not like the national government. We do have a balanced budget. We are debt-free. We have cash investments delivering virtually no return. This was the great opportunity to explore new revenue streams, new ways of converting our capital into revenue to support our services for the long term. You missed the opportunities. There are some tough cuts on some of our treasured services. I won't go for every one, but I'll mention a few. At a time when the Coalition is trying to simplify the world's most confusing benefit system and changing the criteria for housing benefit, you want to reduce funding for the CAB. How off message can that be? A not-for-profit organisation run by an army of volunteers offering advice on things you'd otherwise expect the state to provide will get reduced funding. The finest example of the big society being broken. We could defer that reduction for 12 months and over the next year have a good look at the work that is done, how that is changing and properly evaluate the work the CAB does for us across the borough. The bulky waste team has been halved, we've reduced the community safety resource, and our Olympic legacy, we have reduced the sports team resources and hiked the prices for renting sports venues above the rate of inflation. That's the price our young people will have to pay for our freeze of council tax. It would be easy for me to oppose this budget just for the sake of it, as some will do. We had to ask ourselves, would we have written the same budget if we were in the mess you're in? We concluded we never would have been in the mess you're in. All that may sound depressing. So to cheer you up, I'm going to take you on a virtual trip to the South Coast to see how things could be done differently. That's next week. We've driven very carefully through Eastleigh and got to Southampton. Southampton is the one nation Labour experience. Now, Mr. Mayor, it's been successful. Someone once said, a good test of a council budget is has it made a difference to people's lives? Well, Mr. Mayor, in Southampton, Labour promised no cuts. This year they announced a record £25 million cuts and a further £35 million over the next 2 years. They promised to protect and improve Shore Starts and increase the budget. They cut 1 million from the Sure Start budget. They said children were a priority. They planned to act 7 million from services to vulnerable children, which includes shutting a children's home as well as youth clubs and services and play centres. The council's residential children's unit for traumatised youngsters has been earmarked for closure. They promised to keep the weekly bins. They announced they would axe the weekly bin collection and then performed a U-turn when Eric Pickles helped them out with a bit of money. They promised to protect staff and then increase wages for those on over 22,000. And they were going to trial the use of public votes to help set local priorities, and yet refused to let people campaigning against the abolition of the youth service to the opportunities to speak at a council meeting. They said no job cuts and got rid of 250. They said more jobs and said another 100 would go. They said they'd listened to frontline staff and then suspended 2 councillors who voted against their own cuts. And they said they would restore pride. So when a lifetime Labour man, Councillor Morell, quit the cabinet because he could not politically defend such large-scale cuts, Labour put out a press release saying he was ill and banned Labour councillors from speaking to the press. One Nation Labour's gone very badly in Southampton. In fact, 2 Labour councillors have quit to set up their own group. So much for One Nation, they can't even manage one party. But Mr Mayor, I'd hate to be accused of not offering anything constructive. So I'm going to offer 3 things that I didn't think featured enough in your plan or budget. Firstly, investments. And we've been there before. It's highly unlikely we will ever get much return above inflation from our city investments without taking huge risks. The journey to clean technology is not just about the environment, it's also about the best way to fund services. The 1 million will not provide revenue or tackle climate change sitting in a bank. The Cabinet needs to think big, think bold and be brave. Up till now we've talked about solar panels on council work sheds. It's not enough. Look at the leisure park, the ice rink, the aquadrome, huge buildings and roofs roughly the same size. How much solar energy could we generate? We're already committed to redeveloping the park, and let's commit to making it carbon neutral, the greenest leisure park in the country. A park that powers itself and raise funds to support council services. That has to be the level of ambition we show. On fairness, perhaps one of the biggest challenges facing our borough is the housing crisis. It's not a political point. Every government since the 80s has failed to address the failures of the housing market. A free market where the imbalance between supply and demand is vast and constant, and it's become unhealthy. Some figures showed Basingstoke with a 14.7% increase in prices last year, an average price of £220,000, some 7 times the average full-time salary. No wonder the waiting list has grown 52.6% in the last 2-3 years. My parents' generation were offered council houses, and then they were allowed to purchase them on the cheap. My generation was not so lucky, but was able to purchase a house for 3 times our incomes. I fear for my children. What chance do they have? Mr Mayor, it's time to build social housing. Developers don't want to, the government can't afford to, we can. We have the capital, we have the land. And I'm talking beyond a few £100,000 in a reserve or a chunk of the new homes bonus, a new kind of investment, big money. I know we as a council have schemes being looked at, but they're not enough. We need to be bigger, bolder and braver. And finally, Mr Mayor, on commissioning. I've mentioned that the Lib Dem said 750 homes a year. The Tories said no, wasted a few years, now they agree. We said many down, they said no, wasted a few years, now they agree. We said remove council tax discounts on empty properties. They wasted a few years, and now you finally agreed. We said Basing View should be a green park. The portfolio at the time said no. You've wasted a few years, and now you agree. We said set aside money for green investment. They said no, wasted a few years, and now you agree. So when you're talking about commissioning, perhaps you could do the best bit of commission you've ever done and commission the Liberal Democrats to run the council for you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Tilbury, on behalf of the Independent Forum, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor, yes. What an amusing evening we're having. Yeah, so far, yeah. Yeah, well, at least we know the maths just slipped with the Conservative administration. The 594 is out the window and it was never realistic anyway, so where do we start with that? We have to have incessant growth and it go on and on forever. I mean, clearly he's obviously not an engineer and doesn't understand the third law of thermodynamics, but never mind. But much has been made of the cuts from central government. In our case, a cut of 450,000 from our £6.7 million grant, a reduction of 7%. The real impact is higher, as this assumes no inflationary pressure on our budget. And while we've heard much of the fact that our council tax has been frozen again, the real story, as in previous years, is a massive hike in charges which more than offset this for most residents. And I can't help noticing that when I first joined the council, I think the previous administration froze the council tax for about 4 years, I think. But I don't remember putting up the charges by an outrageous amount over those 4 years, and I think that's the difference. So. And one of the more disturbing features of the excessive levels of housing growth in this borough is a negative effect it has on the existing residents. As this is a budget, I won't dwell on the social or environmental, merely the financial aspects. As it states on page 11 of the budget book, the increase in demographic growth will lead to higher waste collection and street care costs of £65,000, which will only be partially offset by the increase in the council tax base. And of course, the more houses we build, the worse the problem gets. Which left me a little confused, as I clearly recall the leader recently stating that we needed more house building to prevent stagnation. We heard that again tonight, didn't we? However, on the plus side, on the backdated new homes bonus will net us a £3.6 million bonus, thanks to our high build rate of around 1,000 houses each year. Had we continued to build at the previous levels of around 670 a year, we would only have received £2.4 million. So perhaps they are doing something right. Of course, this high bill rate, combined with a failure to allocate new sites and the delay in approving the local plan due to the unfortunate run-in with the judiciary, has left us open to planning by appeal everywhere. But on the plus side, we have made an additional £1.1 million to mitigate the damage to those communities who will be affected. Somehow I doubt they will see it in quite the same way. As if the cut in the grant is not bad enough, despite the best efforts of our highly competent Treasury management team, Kevin's looking up, our income from our substantial investments along with our rental income are also falling, largely due to the government's inability to understand that expansionary fiscal contraction is as crazy as it sounds. To put this in context, when I joined the council in 2002, our income from investments was around £7.8 million a year. It is now forecast to be £3.4 million, a drop of £4.4 million, and that's a lot of money to find from somewhere, isn't it? Clearly, we need to take a different view of how we invest our money, and you may recall that back in 2011, the Independents suggested we should consider lending to housing associations, which would not only have helped with their funding problems, but would have considerably improved our financial situation. As Councillor James has already pointed out, last year's Sentinel went to the money markets to raise £50 million. Such was the demand, they ended up raising £75 million at an all-in rate of 5.13%. Had we lent them or any other association that builds in our borough at a rate of 3 or even 4%, we could have raised about around £1 million more than we were ever likely to get from lending to those very same banks who offer us 2.3%. And given the underlying problems of the banking sector, which has not gone away, at far less risk of losing our money. Sadly, despite backing from all the opposition groups, this administration, one exception, who's now an independent, voted against this. It wouldn't be so bad if they had any better ideas for raising income, but as this budget shows, they clearly have none. Just the usual response to impose cuts with no thought as to the longer-term consequences for society. But it's not only the failure to raise income that's the problem. Our costs are often excessive. Our recently renewed waste collection costs are still more expensive than virtually every other council in South East England, not helped by the additional cost to collect glass bottles now. And again, we talked about the leader talking about reducing energy consumption. Well, that's not a very good way of reducing energy consumption. It's sending a lorry round to collect a lot of worthless glass that could be collected a lot more sensibly. Neither has it improved our recycling rate by any significant amount. I was most bemused to hear the portfolio holder announce at a recent overview meeting that we were no longer the worst in Hampshire, as we had overtaken Southampton City Council, who seemed to be very popular tonight. Others, I thought, as I was sure their rate was much higher than ours. What he neglected to tell us, it was not so much that we had overtaken them, as that they had plummeted from over 30% to 25%. And for those who don't know why, because at the having got their recycling rate up to 30%, the Conservative administration had the brilliant idea of cutting the bin men's pay, who unsurprisingly decided that they really weren't going to have poke up with this and went on strike for 6 months. So if you want to get to the level of recycling that we have in this borough, what you have to do is have a non-collection of dry recyclables for 5 months and no garden waste for 6 months, and then you get down to the same level as we are at now. And that's a city where general recycling is far more difficult to do. Cuts to the CAB. Well, we've all mentioned that tonight. I mean, we raised this at the overview, and I think the portfolio did suggest it would go away and think about that, because we're talking about £12,500. That's not a big sum of money, but the fact that they don't want to even look at that there suggests this isn't about saving money. This is ideological. It's we've got to be seen to be cutting, and that's the problem I have with the Conservatives with this. There's no problem so bad they can't make it worse. And just trying to find out, we mentioned the canteen again. I mean, for anyone who joined this business, that would have been seen as a benefit at the time you joined. It was in lieu of wages. To start taking benefits like that away, when there are possibly other ways of doing this, all right, saying it's subsidised, but there are ways you could increase the cost slightly. That was never really looked at. And I think Councillor James made the point. I've been in on a Friday morning when they used to do the breakfast, and you do see lots of different staff meeting with each other. And I found this when I've worked for companies over many years, when I used to do a lot of contract work. I found the companies that had the good facilities in the canteens were the ones. The reason I've been employed to work there was because the last person, or the reason I've been employed to work there was because they had a lot of work. They were taking on extra people. The companies I worked at that didn't have the canteens, the reason I was there is because the last person left their job to go to work for a decent company. I think that's a problem with this sort of attitude. You don't look at all the other costs there. And the difference is, what are the real costs of these things there? Because if you have to go down the town and buy a pasty for £4 or whatever, I'm sure we could afford to charge a more realistic rate that wasn't even subsidised, possibly. But the point is, this was never really looked at. It's just one of those short-sighted things we do because it seems like a good idea. And I've noticed Eric Pickles suggests on his list of 50 things to do. Well, I could think of a list of 50 things for Eric Pickles to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Tilbury. With that, I am going to reinstate standing orders. I'm going to invite the council leader to formally move the motions, and then we'll enter into a debate, and I will then start taking names. Thank you, council leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then I will formally recommend, on behalf of the Cabinet to Council, the recommendations as on the order paper.
Thank you, leader. We are now taking names, or will endeavour to in a balanced fashion.
Hand down.
Yes, that does have to be seconded, really, I guess. Thank you, Councillor Jane Wardener. Right.
Okay.
You're not the only one who's confused, but we're doing our best. As soon as we've seen all the hands for the moment, that doesn't preclude anybody else putting their hands up.
Yep.
But if we're going to get through this list, people will certainly have to be brief, and I'll beg you, though you've got 5 minutes, try not to use it.
Okay, shall we?
Okay, just to make sure we haven't missed anybody whose name should be there because they put their hands up, the Chief Executive will now read out the authoritative list.
And with apologies to those that I may have missed, I have Councillor West, Mitchell, Harvey, Eyre, Mrs Waldridge, Potter, Keating, J. Wardener, Cousins, Reagan, Golding, Isaac, Hussey, Mrs Cubitt, Hood, Mrs Baker, Shaw, Donnell and Mrs Washbourne. Right.
Right, okay, we're starting. Councillor West. Oh, you've changed your mind. Right, okay. Councillor Mitchell.
Sorry about that. You were waving around very early on.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say a few words about something which is sort of implicit in our council plans, and in a sense implicit in our budgets, but not so clearly so. And it's to do initially, or mainly to do with the vexed issue of where do the houses go, and how many houses do you build, which have been mentioned several times by speakers. Just like to let the council know that in two of the villages in my ward, one of them is planning to build about 40 dwellings in the local plan period, and another has an active programme going on working with officers, of which I think 10 to 15 would probably be affordable homes, and that might be in addition to existing work that's going on in the same village for a rural exception site for about 10 to 15 homes. So we're talking about quite big numbers there. This is spontaneously promoted by the local community. In another village, there's an active work going on with officers to do some regeneration, which will lead to, I think, something like net 20 plus new dwellings, again, including a high proportion of affordable dwellings. We're getting support from officers on that one, but the local communities are doing themselves in the other one on a neighbourhood plan basis. And really, the point that I want to make about this is that it is possible to do some of the work required for fulfilling the council plan in housing terms on a bottom-up basis. You couldn't put that in the council plan. In fact, if you put it in the council plan and issued it as a council proposal, it would fall flat and be opposed vehemently by all those who are currently promoting it and supporting it, because they don't like anybody inflicting anything on them. I was interested by the leader of the Labour group's announcement that if Labour were in office, heaven help us, they would immediately embark on having two community land trusts, one rural pilots, one rural and one urban. Well, my view on that is that it doesn't need any local government organisation to do that. It's a community activity. There's support available. There's reference points available. I was in a meeting just like this week where we were discussing a nearby community land trust. Why that requires the council, and in fact, in my view, if you came to one of my villages and said, we're going to do you a community land trust, they'd say, go away, thank you very much, like people do with, I'm from head office, I've come to support you. And the point that I wanted to make is that implicit in our council plan and our council activities and budgets, implicit in that is what we do individually as members. And I really put it to all members of the council, and I think this could apply equally well in urban areas as in rural areas, that if you work positively in your local communities, if you're regarded as helpful and trustworthy and credible and on their side, and that last one is the critical thing, and you avoid getting into being the leader of the negative approach to planning, you become regarded as a leader or one of the leaders and one of the helpers in the positive approach to planning. It's amazing how much can be done. Now, if we did that in all the equivalent villages in the borough and in some of the urban areas where maybe on a slightly different scale similar things could be accomplished, you would achieve something like a quarter of what I expect to be the housing number required in the local plan, and you would take a lot of pressure off those who are really concerned about the top-down approach of putting in site allocations. You'd have less housing to put into site allocations because more would be absorbed in the countryside. I'm not proposing that this becomes a part of things that we ask officers to work on and come up with proposals. That would entirely defeat the object. However, I do believe there may be other examples in other areas. I do believe those examples, of which there is concrete evidence, can be used with the inspectorate when we go with the local plan, can be used as evidence to say that we can achieve numbers in parts of the borough outside of, on a greater level than the officers currently think, outside of site allocations. And looking at the whole tremendous work's been done in P&I over 3 nights recently, fortunately in my absence from the country, I'm very glad to say. Looking at what's happened in there, I think that would be a great help to all concerned. I urge all members
to go back to their local communities, look for local opportunities that they can use and encourage their local people. It's long term, it's slow, but it is worthwhile. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. You more or less kept to time. I do beg as many members who are able to go below the time so more people get a chance. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there comes a time in every political cycle, in every term of office, when an administration runs out of steam. I mean, I've heard of the government omnishambles, but this Tory administration, Mr. Mayor, is an omnishambles here in Basingstoke. It kind of feels like the leader's rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, but he still hasn't seen or is purposefully oblivious to the fact that they're letting in water below the waterline. And taking that analogy one stage further, Mr. Mayor, it seems very clear to us that it's all those in steerage who are going to drown first. It says it all, really, that the Tories' draft council plan is just written on a page and a third of A4. If that's the extent of their ambition for Basingstoke, then what an absolute statement of exhaustion. This council plan and this Tory administration are completely disconnected from the people, the reality that people are living. And the words of the council plan do not amount to a plan for economic growth. They do not amount to a response to the housing crisis. And when it comes to the local plan and the future of Basingstoke, well, the Tories are just living in Alice in Wonderland. The Tories are banking on Basingview creating thousands of new jobs. But for whom? And what about the wider economy? Too many small businesses have already gone under. Too many big businesses are leaving or have left Basingstoke. This Tory administration has little claim to economic competence when we do face levels of youth unemployment and when many of our own assets, our own business parks, stand empty. We need a far more versatile inward investment strategy for the whole of Basingstoke's economy and a real focus on job creation. Mr. Mayor, I've seen the full extent of the housing crisis in casework. Not enough stock to house people in priority. We now have to prioritise those who are in priority. And we see regeneration proposals where people are being forced to move so their existing homes can be knocked down and replaced. But we do not have a decanting strategy. No wonder people feel that this council just doesn't care or understand. Housing policy and management in this council are in a mess. And if there's one thing that the Tories have done that flows from the economic crisis, is to have unlocked in so many places the anger and sense of injustice that people feel towards others. Theirs is the politics of the worthy and unworthy. They react at a poor person who is unachieving or undeserving in their eyes, and the jobless because it's their own fault for not getting on in life and for not succeeding. The Tories paint people in poverty as scroungers. They demonise them. And then on reality TV, it helps set the stereotype. For 2.5 years of national government and 6 years locally now, the Tories have no one else to blame but themselves for the triple dip recession. And let's not forget those who are now excused of that burden because of top-rate tax cuts, bankers' bonuses and £1,000,000 payoffs. The truth is, the poorest in society are being made to suffer most. And Mr. Mayor, there is another rewriting of history going on in this council plan. According to the leader, they will deliver a council plan, a local plan that ensures well-planned development, quote. And they say, support local communities to shape their area in the way they want through neighbourhood plans. Who are they trying to fool? Next week, the planning cabinet member will make a decision to build up to 100% more homes on green fields than was being proposed last year. The Conservatives are irresponsible for single-handedly opening up this borough to planning by appeal. They have exposed every community in Greenfield to badly planned development without the infrastructure we all know is needed. The Conservatives are forcing development on communities because their government demands growth top down. The whole local plan, as proposed, is simply not fit for purpose. And because of their unlawful actions, they will destroy Basingstoke as we know it. So to hear some cabinet members now ask for sites like Razors Farm to be removed now, when they voted for them to be developed last year, just beggars belief. Omnishambles really is the word, isn't it? You know, Mr. Mayor, to finish, the Tories administration, Mr. Mayor, reminds me of the Dickens character, Mr. Micawber. So I think they need a brand new opening to their council plan. And I quote, "Welcome poverty, welcome misery, welcome houselessness, welcome hunger, rage and tempest, and beggary. Mutual confidence will sustain us all to the end." We have absolutely no confidence in this Conservative administration.
Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I was looking forward to reading a budget and a council plan that would really make a difference to the lives of the honest, decent residents of our borough. I was looking forward to reading a budget which would provide hope and encouragement in these harsh times, a budget which would show true leadership and courage, a budget that would demonstrate to our residents that we are in touch with their concerns, with their needs and their aspirations. How disappointed then I am with what is on the table this evening. So disappointed that I want to highlight how we would do things differently. We would put our core values of fairness, social justice, and equal chances in life for everyone at the very heart of our plan and the associated budget. We would address the inequalities in our communities, and we would spend money where it is most needed. We would work tirelessly to build socially rented homes. We would tackle the impact of welfare reform. We would tackle neighbourhood neglect and work to achieve decent neighbourhoods for all. We would focus on jobs and small businesses. We would tackle child poverty, as well as strive for a fair deal for elderly and disabled people. We would improve recycling and home energy. We would fight for much better public transport. We would tackle the issue of lack of confidence by residents in community safety head on. All of these matters would feature within our budget strategy and community plan. But, Mr. Mayor, most important of all, we would restore integrity to this council. We believe in the cooperative council model, people working together for the common good, benefiting individuals and the wider community of which they are a part. From the way the council is run, structured and managed, to the way that it invests and uses the resources at its disposal, we see and we appreciate the pressing need now for a new direction of travel. Our cooperative model is not a way of getting something for nothing, or getting people to do things on the cheap that the state or professionals should be providing. It is rather a model built on enduring values of fairness, accountability, and responsibility that offer huge potential for innovation. Mr. Mayor, we can provide an alternative, a plan B, a council plan and a budget that will really make a difference, inspire and excite. We want to offer hope and positive politics for our residents in these hard times. On this side of the chamber, we have a shared belief in the improvements we want to see. We want this council working with partners and residents to achieve those much needed changes that will make such a positive difference. I've seen this council becoming more and more distant from its residents, treating them with contempt if they come to ask questions in person. It's time to stop this. It's time for the council to change. It appears to have forgotten that it is elected by the people to serve the people in an open, transparent, inclusive, and above all, democratic way. Mr. Mayor, I cannot support the budget or the council plan on the table this evening, and I will be voting against both, as they offer nothing which will truly address the current inadequacies and deficiencies of the administration. I want to be a part of a council which believes in everybody having a stake, in which prosperity is fairly shared, a council which promotes the sense that we can all feel part of something bigger than ourselves as individuals, a council that supports the struggling small businesses of our town, as well as improving public services, and a council that stands up to any vested interests. Thank you.
Thank you for your brevity as well. Councillor Waldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to address my concerns about the lack of a coherent commitment to deal with poverty in the budget and council plan, starting first with child poverty. There are 3,237 children living in poverty in Basingstoke. In some wards, it is nearly 30%. Over 100 people have recently been supported by Basingstoke Food Bank, which opened in October following much hard work from local churches and the Trussell Trust.
The situation is about to get a whole lot worse as the impact of the welfare reform is about to bite. Whilst I support the community support fund provision in the budget, I have grave concerns that it is merely a one-off temporary sticking plaster brought about by panic to deal with the impending chaos of welfare reform, rather than the start of a longer-term commitment to really helping those children and families in poverty. Turning now to youth unemployment. Unemployment only gets one mention in the council plan, which says Basingstoke-Dean has relatively low unemployment at 2.2% of the working age population. Of those aged 18 to 24, the figure is 4.9%, much lower than the national average. Surprise, surprise, the statistics the council plan doesn't mention are the shocking figures of the long-term young unemployed. Between January 2011 and December 2012, there has been a 100% increase of 18 to 24-year-olds claiming job seekers allowance over 6 months, from 45 cases to 90 cases. Even more alarming is the 400% increase between December 2011 and December 2012 of 18 to 24-year-olds claiming job seekers allowance for over 12 months, going up from 10 cases to 50 cases. The council plan only contains one line about apprenticeships, stating that it will increase provision and take up local apprenticeships by developing and promoting opportunities together with BCOT and the Enterprise M3. But there are no definite plans to do anything specific or even a budget to do anything. Strangely enough, Highclere Castle and Downtime Abbey are mentioned as much in the council plan as unemployment is. This perhaps tells you something about the priorities of the party opposite. I cannot possibly support a budget or council plan that scarcely gives a nod to the plight of so many of our borough's young people. Finally, fuel poverty, which is fast turning into another national crisis. The proportion of homes in fuel poverty in England and Wales has seen a dramatic increase in 2 years, up from 1 in 5 households to 1 in 4. Basingstoke is not immune from this increasing trend. In some parts of Basingstoke, nearly 1 in 5 can't afford to heat their houses this winter. This is hardly surprising given the rising cost of energy bills. The average energy bill has now hit a record high of £1,400, which means that people are genuinely having to choose between heating their homes or putting food on their table. The people who suffer most are the elderly, the young and the disabled. A quarter of mums have had to choose food overheating as a result of spiralling energy bills. A recent survey conducted by the Energy Bill Revolution campaign and Next Mums has revealed an alarming 23% say they have faced the desperate choice of food and heating, between food and heating this winter. The poll also reveals that 8 out of 10 families are rationing warmth in their homes. The End Fuel is a broad-based
One more
group
minute,
of
Councillor.
agencies, including Age Concern, Child Poverty Action Group. It has challenged local authorities to sign up to their campaign to show commitment to act on tackling fuel poverty in the areas. A Labour council in Basingstoke would treat this issue as a priority and sign up to the local authority fuel poverty commitment. And we would commit our council to measures such as understanding the extent of fuel poverty in our area and practically taking action to address it in a strategic way. Where is this strategic approach to dealing with fuel poverty and other forms of poverty from this lacklustre Tory administration? The party opposite has clearly no ideas of its own and can't even adopt sensible policies of others to help the poorest in our borough. Perhaps this is because it has no real desire or inclination to do so. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
With 1 second to spare, thank you. Councillor Potter. Councillor Waldridge, would you mind switching your mic off, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll do my best, like others, to keep within the time limit. Just a comment, first of all, on Councillor Gavin James's speech, if I may, which we were all amused by. But I mean, certainly he made it clear that the prospect of a joint administration formed from this side of the chamber is probably more remote than ever, and that ought to give the Tories some solace. I believe this is a poor budget, Mr. Mayor. Regrettably not designed to protect the poor in our community, as I say it should be, but in part because of mismanagement, but mostly by design, it fails all the important tests. And before members opposite or elsewhere leap to the defence of paid staff, my criticism is not levelled at them, but at the administration who determine policies in this council. I say many of the proposals and lack of proposals are driven by an ideology that seeks to have a smaller and less supportive public sector and ignores the plight of many in our community who are facing real cutbacks in their wages and benefits. Why else would you argue against continuing council tax discount for the poorest, as this administration did, to its shame, and make no commitment for future protection in this budget? I have heard it said that people should be able to manage their small and reducing income provided they budget better. What a patronising attitude to have. Why wouldn't you be able to manage on £71 per week job seeker allowance? After all, you can get a good bottle of wine for that amount, I'm told. The poorest in society didn't cause the recession. Those with real wealth did. And again, before members opposite jump up to have a go at the last Labour government, let's at least agree that there is a global recession caused largely by unregulated banks and investors. In specific terms, I make the following points about the budget. It's wrong in principle to hive away money in reserves when people are desperate for public services to support them in these difficult times. After all the problems this council has been caused by the manipulation of the Manidown land issue, it's astonishing that no reference is made to the county council's decision, which is before its cabinet tomorrow, to pay back the remaining 4.5 million owed to this council during 2013 and 14. Never mind, no clear accounting of the £500,000 which has already been repaid. All of the platitudes from the leader made previously about a fresh start and transparency mean nothing, and we continue in the same obscure way over this public asset. Because that's what it is, a public asset bought with LSVT money. This land bank of 2,000 acres represents a real opportunity to this council as well as a challenge. Why not be looking at the prospect of real investment in infrastructure with the assets we hold being used for this purpose rather than waiting for the developer profits in the form of 106 agreements to provide this? We can most certainly achieve a better return on any investment we make in this connection. We've squandered 7 years, at least 7 years, in the development of this site already, and we need a radical approach for this opportunity to go on from here. Headline figures in this budget suggest a revenue budget reduction of £2.176 million. Which services are going to be cut to accommodate this? Additionally, there are projected deficits in 2015-16 and 2016-17, even after a 2% increase in council tax. Again, which services are to be cut to accommodate this? Finally, Mr. Mayor, just a quote. People will be surprised that councils are hoarding billions in their coffers, whilst at the same time some are pleading poverty. Whilst local authorities should maintain a healthy cushion, it's time for them to tap into their substantial reserves to ensure they protect frontline services with a view to building up their reserves again in sunnier days to come. Given the rise in reserves, it is disappointing and irresponsible that some sections of local government have chosen to needlessly scare the public with unfounded predictions of doom and gloom. This is not a quote by some off-the-wall Labour politician, not that we have any, by the way, but Local Government and Communities Secretary Eric Pickles. I imagine he had this council in mind when he wrote it. I say to council, reject this budget and the council plan, which fails the people of Basingstoke and Deane. We can do much better than this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Next speaker, I just, so that you're aware, I have listed 60 more speakers. 16, not 60, 16. And I intend to close the list at that. The next speaker is Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I first of all say I'm sorry to be saying that I'm ashamed to be part of a council in leafy Hampshire where we have food banks stopping people starving. It's a shame, and we don't need to have it, and we as a council could, should, and will be doing something about it when we change administration. Secondly, Mr. Mayor, can I say it is critical that you do understand that the people on housing benefit, council tax benefit, and any other benefits are already, by government standards, the poorest. They only qualify, having been means tested, as so poor they can't pay their regular bill. That's the people who are impacted by council tax cuts, housing benefit cuts, the bedroom tax, and all those other benefits. These people have already been defined as in poverty and need help to pay their bills. Now, for Tory ministers to suggest it's simply a process of budgeting better ignores the basic fact. They're already defined as the poorest. Now, this budget, and I don't intend to go through it all, this budget is cutting money to the community services and organizations that help people. On all the current estimates, the people who will be impacted by the housing benefit cuts, by the the council tax cuts, by the bedroom tax, they're all currently in poverty. They are all estimated to be looking for help from the CAB by 40% this year alone. And the accumulative effect of what's going to happen next year, ignored totally by this budget, is absolutely shocking. Now, I make no apology whatsoever for mentioning Manny Down again. It's the biggest thing that's happened to this council, the biggest spot on its image in this council since I've been a councillor. Hampshire County Council owes us money, and they've decided to pay it back. Now, it's a decision of Hampshire County Council proposed for tomorrow morning. They will pay us all the money they owe us back for Manidown. Where is it? I couldn't find it in the budget at all. Now, there were lots of projections in the budget, but this is not projected at all. So what will happen? Oh, it'll be received in about 6 weeks' time, and oh my goodness gracious me, we'll probably put it into reserves. We'll put it, right? And in those reserves, it will probably earn about 2%. Can I turn now to a hobby horse of mine? I have many. There are milestones, and there are milestones. We have a museum in Basingstoke called Milestones. Only now, in budget terms, it's no longer Milestones. It's the Milestones Museum and Basing House. It's no longer one item in the budget. It was one item in the budget as a museum. It's now one item in the budget with adding in Basing House. Now, last year,
You've got under a minute, I'm afraid,
oh,
Councillor.
thank you very much. Last year, the Hampshire County Council added the two together, put £10,000 on top of their request to us, and now call it one budget line. It's a con job, and we should not be putting up with it. Finally, can I just turn for a moment to the Anvil? Right? The Anvil gets a 1.1 or 2 million pound grant, but it also gets a subsidy of 266,000 pounds for rent. If you add those two things together, it's more than 50% of our community budget to community organisation in total. It's shocking. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Heaton. Councillor J. Warden now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. £32 million. It's a lot of money, but that's what we are committing to the communities of Basingstoke and Deane. And it's why we strive on this side for a responsible budget with sensible spending focused on the needs of our people. Britain is in a global race. It's sink or swim, do or decline, and it's the same for Basingstoke. We are competing with our rivals in Reading, Guildford, Bracknell, Winchester, even Southampton, as we hear tonight. And to succeed in that race, we must invest for the future and balance the books today. We mustn't live beyond our means. We mustn't sell the family silver. We mustn't go for the quick fix. And yet, sadly, that's what Labour once again suggests that we do. This council plan strives to make Basingstoke and Deane a borough of aspiration where businesses thrive, where the public sector delivers, and where the people who work hard can get on in life. And that's why I'm delighted that this plan includes the town centre, Basingview, and the leisure park as key initiatives. And in the interest of time, I'll focus on just one, Basingview. Basingview is a long-term project that was started by this Conservative administration under Councillors Leake and Finney, and former Councillor Lewin passed the baton on to me. We've taken buildings down, we're smartening up the area, we've signed up a development partner to lever in private capital, and I'm pleased to confirm that we've exchanged on a sale with Network Rail, who want to bring hundreds of new jobs to Basingstoke. This is just the beginning, but it is an exciting start. And this administration is clear. Basingstoke is a place to do business. But we couldn't do this without being responsible with our assets. This council is blessed with a valuable property and investment portfolio. It is incumbent on us to use it wisely. So at the same time as we are allocating £32 million to our capital programme, we are using our investments to support services that our residents depend on and keep our council tax down. We are proposing another 2 years of no change to council tax. At the end of that period, the council tax will not have changed for 5 years. And to be clear, that means that this council will only have cost residents 29 pence a day over the last 5 years. What have we done with that 29 pence? We've kept the weekly bins and introduced curbside glass collection. We've made our streets safer by investing in more patrols. We've strived for efficiency savings by investing, and those have totaled £7 million over the last 5 years. We've now created a new special £500,000 community support fund to provide support to residents where it's needed most. We've grown our capital programme to £32 million over the next 4 years. We've campaigned for better broadband, and we're getting it. We've called for improvements at junction 6 of the M3, and they're doing it. And we've supported first-time buyers to get on the housing ladder. Done. There is so much good news that it is a great shame Labour keep talking our borough down. This council is well managed, well funded, and on a stable footing for the future, delivering the services that matter and able to take the decisions that count. We've fought to keep the lowest council tax in Hampshire, and it is. But the fact is that Labour isn't learning. This is a country that is in a situation because the Labour government spent and borrowed too much. Labour's answer to the national debt crisis is more spending, more borrowing, and more debt. And locally, they want to do the same. Spend, 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 whatever the consequences. Same old Labour. You can't trust them with the economy, and you can't trust them with this council. Labour isn't learning. Labour's something for nothing culture was about more than just government borrowing money we didn't have. They failed to tackle welfare so that it was easier to sit at home rather than going out to work. They voted against the government's plans to cap benefits. So it should come as no surprise that when we put forward proposals to focus our resources on the most vulnerable and help those out of work back to work, they voted against. They are against aspiration. We have a positive plan for Basingstoke and Dean. We've demonstrated our ambition for the future, and we are delivering value for money for our residents, valued by all our residents at this difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. The next speaker is Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, there is no doubting that the budget presented by the party opposite is one of cuts, cuts and more cuts. Many residents will be disheartened with the offer in front of councillors tonight, and I can sympathise with them. Now, there are many areas that I could talk about, but I want to focus my contribution on the impact this budget has on young people in Basingstoke. From looking through the papers, there isn't any positive news for young people in our borough. In fact, it's incredibly bleak. Since Connections was cut, young people feel disengaged with the community and are disengaged with local politics. As a result, they feel their lives mean nothing to councillors in this chamber, and Mr. Mayor, I can fully understand them. But I want to assure young people in the borough that there are a group of people listening to them. There are a group of people who want to help them, and there are a group of people willing to take the action necessary to make them feel part of this community once more. It's the Labour group, Mr. Mayor, and I can tell them why. The budget shows how young people are thought of in Basingstoke and Dean. We can see that the funds in relation to active, healthier and safer communities have been reallocated to the sports and recreation budget. Last year, just over £19,000 was spent on youth sport programmes. The Olympic Legacy Fund that replaces it is £8,000. Mr. Mayor, the motto for the Olympics was to inspire a generation. That fund does nothing to inspire a generation whatsoever. And what's more, there is no fund set aside for promoting disability sport in this borough, and that is a disgrace. If the Minister for Culture, Media and Sport lived in this town, I would want her to explain her thoughts and feelings to me, considering she has £1 billion of public money set aside to promote youth and community sport across this country. Now, the Basingstoke Youth Movement tonight have presented a petition to us to look at the prospect of building an indoor skate park, and I welcome their enthusiasm, their hard work and their drive to get behind a common cause and get young people engaged in politics. Yeah. Mr. Mayor, if they can get young people interested in politics, why can't the administration? Is it in truth that by cutting funds to the youth strategy, they think that will improve youth services in our borough? If they do, they are mistaken and they are misguided. In order to help young people in this borough, we need to be there to help them. And by removing Connections, there is a massive gap in youth support, and we should be investing in plugging that gap. In this budget, the Anvil will once again receive a fund of over £1 million, and I find this unacceptable. The Anvil is a highly successful organisation on its own, and it can be supported with a lesser grant than it's receiving at present. And by doing that, reducing that grant, those funds could be freed up to invest somewhere else. I'm pleased to say that one area that we would like to invest in is to develop a young person's passport. This passport would act as a means of access to public transport, to facilities, to opportunities and offers throughout Basingstoke. We would work with youth groups and partners to develop this scheme as a cooperative social enterprise. And we would work with the occupiers of the leisure park to ensure that discounts are delivered as part of this scheme. Mr. Mayor, this would make a fantastic contribution to our younger residents in the borough. It would give them the chance to get to and from school, to college, to work. It would enable them to contribute to our local economy by visiting the town centre and the leisure park and once again involve them in Basingstoke. As a Labour group, we will right the wrongs being played out by the party opposite. As for this budget, it offers no direction for young people. It pushes them aside for life in our town, and in times of hardship, they have not offered them any assistance. The Tories are not willing to invest in their futures, engage with them, or support them. Mr. Mayor, because of this and so much more, I cannot support this budget or the council plan. Thank you.
I'm glad Councillor Mitchell agrees with some of what you said. Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to be brief and short and to the point, but I want to make one point first, because... Is it on? Yeah. I just want to answer really Gavin James. I wasn't going to reply to the Liberal Democrats, but it's... I'm sick of hearing about them raising the bottom tax rates, but you only pay tax when you're working. They've increased unemployment, don't make what they say, and so you don't pay tax. But what they will be doing this April, the top rate of income tax will be cut from 50 to 45p, which gives a double whammy. If you're wealthy, you get the bottom and the top, so you're quite wealthy, so that's quite good for them. And also the welfare reforms didn't come in with the wind. They can't sit in opposition. They're actually here. They actually voted for it. So it's their policy. So they used to say, the Liberals, were always sitting in the middle of the road and getting run over. But what they don't realise, they already are run over. And just going on to the Deputy Leader's point, he come to us. So the Deputy Leader was at the EPP committee meeting where we discussed the CAB and all the impact of this government's welfare reforms are going to have on people and how the CAB really in the frontline organisations needs money. And he said, I'll consider it, take it away. I said, well, is that a commitment? He said, no, we'll consider it. He didn't consider it, he went away and had a cup of tea because they just carried on with the cuts. They're desperately needed. Meanwhile, the money is lavished on the anvil. We've gone back to when I was councillor before, over 10 years ago, he was lavishing money on the anvil instead of going to reform it and get to grips with it. Let's get going. Let's look into the anvil. Why it costs so much money? What they do? Why does it need so much? It's a commercial run organisation. There were plenty of other things I was going to say about austerity and stuff. I think many of others have said that. So, Mayor, you're going to be pleased with me. I will go back to one point. It's when Mr. Cameron became Prime Minister or Leader of the Opposition. Before that, he said that the government would be the most greenest government ever. Immediately did that, they cut money to all green schemes coming into government and actually cut money to public transport. So it's no surprise that actually nothing in the council plan that says anything about public transport. My constituents can't get a bus after 9:30 at night. When they work, go out, so they either got to get in a car, drives up the emissions. So that means one of the huge success bus services in Basingstoke is what we set up when it was a joint administration. It was when they did have a social conscience. We set up the pink bus service and actually running from the Basingview, which is now being redeveloped, to the leisure park. So it helps young people, helps bring people into town for park and ride, and helps develop Basingview. Well, I do note there's nothing in the council plan about this bus shuttle service. I understand the contract now finishes in March, and there's no commitment now to renew the contract or to extend the current provision with the current contractor. So there's no commitment to the bus shuttle service, a real service that benefits people. So I asked somebody over there, they might want to ask me, they don't want to answer the public, but they might want to ask me as a councillor the question, is it going to continue, yes or no? I mean, you're out there now. So I could say 1,000 other things, but I will be voting against the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Regan. One of the shortest, but very potent. The next speaker, Councillor Golding.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to start on an important point of detail with the council plan. On page 3622 in the updates, there is noted a recommendation for the Cabinet to alter some wording of the draft plan. Unfortunately, some words have been left out, and I checked this with the webcast today, and it should say after the word introduction, of additional green infrastructure. I'm not sure if I need to formally propose that as an amendment, but if I do, I hereby formally propose it. We should be voting on this with those words included.
Fine, understood, and that's
Thank you.
accepted.
I commend to Council the £500,000 Community Support Fund mentioned in paragraphs 6.12.3 and 19.2 of the Officer Report. I had hoped that this would be supported by councillors across the Council, but I must say I've been extremely disappointed by the response from opposition councillors this evening. We all know that our residents who rely on welfare benefits or social housing are facing a variety of changes over the coming months. We, as the administration, are working actively with the registered social landlords to help their tenants prepare for the changes and to make sure they have the advice and support they need. The good news is that the RSLs report that many of their tenants have already decided how they will adapt to the new rules, but others clearly will need further advice and support. As an administration, we want to be sure that we have set aside the resources necessary to provide that advice and support. If approved, this fund would be a strategic budget which we could use flexibly to meet needs as they emerge. If this fund is approved, I fear from comments earlier that it's going to be voted against, I would still hope that we will be able to very quickly set up a cross-party map to discuss the priorities for use of this money, so we can agree the way forward and make early decisions to spend this money where it is needed. Commissioning more work from the CAB is one option we need to consider, but only if you vote for it. The details of some of the changes are still being developed by government, and we get an involving picture from the RSLs every time we meet with them. So we're proposing a fund rather than specific items of expenditure, so we have some flexibility to direct the money where it is most needed as the situation develops. I should also remind councillors, as has already been done, that we are also putting money into supporting home ownership. We've recently launched the local authority mortgage scheme with Lloyds TSB, and this looks like being very valuable. By the time of the official launch, Lloyds already had appointments booked with several customers who were interested in the scheme. Mr Mayor, several councillors have mentioned the need for more social or affordable housing in this borough, and as an administration we agree. That's why we are working very hard with the registered social landlords to see how we can work together to achieve that goal. Various people suggested we should invest with them. We've asked them about that. That is not their priority at the moment. Councillor Tilbury, with a great use of figures that was rather misleading, contrasted the rate of interest that the housing associations are paying on a 25-year loan with the rate of interest we get on a 2-year loan. Those are just not comparable, and you can't compare them. But the RSLs are not currently interested in direct loans. We are considering with them other ways of working together and investing money. But to be honest, the biggest obstacle currently they face is the fact that you cannot build affordable social housing unless you go back to huge estates, unless you also build market housing. And you can't build any housing unless planning permissions are granted. And the whole of the time I've been a councillor, there's been a consistent opposition from members opposite to planning applications. Unless that changes, there is going to be no affordable housing. It's absolutely true. And that is the biggest obstacle. And we would happily put the money in if there were the schemes into which we could put it. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Isaac.
Mr Mayor, as portfolio holder, I'm pleased to endorse the budget report and offer my support to the wise words and good leadership of Councillor Sanders. Thank you. By taking tough and timely decisions and carefully managing our finances, this administration is able to put forward a responsible, balanced budget for this year. And I take it that it is an important priority for us to live within our means. This is an achievement at a time when the cold winds of the financial crisis continue to rip, when the returns we can earn on the safest investments in government bonds is at its lowest for a generation, something that seems to have escaped the Labour leader. Now, I'd like to point out that over the last 7 years, when UK interest rates fell from 5.25% to 0.5%, our overall returns on our investments dropped only from 5% to 4%. But I do agree with the Liberal Democrat leader, that we need to relook at where we're investing, take more risks to achieve higher returns while maintaining prudence. I'm always keen on maintaining prudence. We're doing just that now. And when the changes and necessary reductions in central government funding are key parts of our responsibilities as a council, business rates, council tax are creating budgetary challenges and uncertainties. We are balancing the budget and yet at the same time holding down our council tax for a fourth year. And we aim to do that next year for a fifth time in succession. That's no mean achievement in this economic climate. And in contrast to many councils, this is being done with zero borrowings. Our Band D rate is the lowest in Hampshire and the sixth lowest in England. Contrast our Band D of £104.44p with Hert's £151.84p and Rushmore's £184.07p. I think that's pretty important to our residents. To balance our budget, it has been necessary to continue to bear down on our costs for the sixth year in a row. For this budget, we're finding £2.2 million of further efficiency savings on top of the £7 million of the last 5 years. That's a sizable 16% decrease in our gross running costs over the 6 years. That's what I call living in the real world. Contrary to the confused views opposite, we are maintaining services to residents. Our expenditure per head at £187.87 is the highest in Hampshire and the seventh highest in all English district councils. Alongside controlling our own costs, this Conservative administration understands, as Councillor Sanders has said, the need to invest in the future of the borough and in our residents, and is doing just that. I'm pleased that in this budget we're providing new capital investment of over £9.5 million for 2013-14 as part of an overall programme of over £31 million for the 5 years from 2012-13. This is an increase of over £10 million or 50% on previously announced capital expenditure. We are using our resources to invest in the borough's future, not sitting on them.
1 more minute, Councillor.
What are we thank you. What are we investing in? Basing View regeneration, the Black Dam roundabout improvements, play area and sports facilities. We've also included an additional £500,000 for residents' parking. And being able to direct £1 million for green investment is an important and exciting initiative. There is much to be done if we are to continue to renew and revitalise the borough and achieve the goals of the council plan. This budget and the capital investment plan are sound foundations for enabling us to make good progress in the years ahead towards these objectives.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hussey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start off by recalling some of the words from the leader's speech. Residents want a high quality of life for themselves and their families. I believe that. I'm not certain he does. Residents want a chance of a home where they want to live. I believe that too. But I don't think he can. Let's just look at social housing. In 2010, there were 4,500 people on the register. As of yesterday, there were 6,800. It's growing at 25% per annum. By this time next year, with the plans they have in this budget, the register will grow to 7,500. If all the 750 houses that we're planning to build each year were devoted to social housing, every one, it would still be 10 years. The leader said, we have to have a housing plan that meets housing needs. How does this plan address the real issue of the lack of social housing? How does this plan, quoting his words, balance their immediate needs with their long-term emerging needs, the growing need for social housing? And how is this a budget for the children and the children's children who are waiting for social housing? We've heard that they're talking to the housing associations. After 7 years of administration, they're talking. That's not enough. It's shameful. You need to have a positive plan to address the growing need of social housing in this borough. Don't talk about affordable housing, talk about social housing. Don't blame planning. Where's your policy? There's nothing in this plan. You've
Councillor
totally
Hussey,
neglected...
through the Mayor, please.
Pardon? Sorry, Mr. Mayor, they've totally neglected the needs of some of the most vulnerable people in this borough. There's zilch in this budget for them, and they're going to get zilch support from this side of the House.
Councillor Cubitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am going to support this budget, but there are some issues that I have some very serious concerns about. The coalition government could not be clearer on a whole range of issues. Eric Pickles could not have been more explicit when he said that council should not be stashing away reserves when it's raining. And it is, we are in the midst of rainy days for a lot of people in our borough, and I really do urge the administration to reconsider how they deal with these reserves, which are being increased. The leader referred to a reduction in the grant from central government, but we know that actually there's been a major reconfiguration so that the monies that will be received by our council going forward come in very large part through the New Homes Bonus Grant. So it's not completely correct or fair or accurate to say we're going to get a significant reduction when actually there's this huge pot of money that's already heading our way, and we're banking 3.5 million, I think, this year. So the reserves are an issue, and I think all of the opposition parties have mentioned it, and I think that the administration really has to think long and hard about how acceptable it is for us to continue to increase pots of money all over the place that are not generating huge amounts of money when we could be doing something else with them. Which brings me on to the next subject, which is social housing. Another policy of the coalition government has been to state to councils that you should really be building council houses on council-owned land. Now, we are very fortunate in this council in that we do own a significant amount of borough-owned land, and I actually think we shouldn't be looking at this 60-40 split or 70-30 split, that we actually ought to be really revolutionary about how we propose to meet the social housing needs in this borough. And I believe that whilst I don't accept or agree with the Liberal Democrat figure of 745, because it would just continue to mean building more and more market housing to try and build a small number of social houses, which is actually the real need that we have at the moment. And we just continue to build vast dormitory wards around our urban conurbations. So I would like the administration to chuck out the rule book, to look at considering building council houses, not affordable homes, because I loathe that expression. I don't know what it means to anybody. And to looking at a lot of the policies that are being put forward by the coalition government on terraced council houses on land that we own. The other thing that I have very serious concerns about is the reduction in grants to the third sectors. The coalition government has been very explicit from the outset, and the Conservative manifesto before the last general election was explicit that we had a duty of care to look after those who are the most vulnerable in our society, especially when there is significant economic hardships in certain sectors, and that hitting vulnerable in our society where it hurts during these times was not in the Conservative manifesto. And reducing grants to third sector organisations who look after the most vulnerable was also very explicitly identified by the Conservatives and subsequently by the coalition government as not an acceptable activity. So I urge the administration, and I'm glad to hear that Councillor Golding has suggested and intimated that out of the community infrastructure levy, that some of that monies might be used to commission the Citizens Advice Bureau to address the shortfall, which I think is completely unacceptable for the 5th year running in funds to the Citizens Advice Bureau. And finally, in terms of no, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I listened very intently to the Leader of the Council's speech, and I was very disappointed that very little time was spent talking about a subject dear to my heart and affects most people here, is waste collection. Now, this is a 4-year plan, and yet nothing was said. Have you just become complacent, or have you just given up? But I've been reassured by the Deputy Leader, who said we have positive plans in place. So I look forward to being enlightened of how they can increase the recycling rate. Recycling is regularly used as one of the top 3 most important council services. In the latest residence showing it is now in 2nd place. Why is our recycling performance so poorly? The Gazette recently reported that the councils is ranked 343 out of 352 councils across the country of its recycling performance. This year's recycling rate has barely improved in last year's. In fact, the latest quarterly figure is below 25%. What is most worrying, perhaps, is a huge increase we are seeing in complaints from residents in the last 12 months, and also the huge increase in the number of missed bins. And whilst the budget does provide a little extra money to provide 8 bins across the borough to recycle Tetra Paks, I wonder, however, whether 8 bins is sufficient for 170,000 residents. There don't appear to be any plans in place in the budget to improve the recycling rate, and I'm concerned about that. Let's talk about what we could do, perhaps. An authority not far from here was struggling to reach 30%. Overnight, they increased that to 60%. And how did they do it? They introduced free garden waste collection. Now, I know that we have garden waste collection, and currently it costs the residents £29 per year. The number of participants is around about 6,000, and we generate 3% of returns for our investment. But perhaps it's time to step outside the box and look at new ideas. I've suggested one. You may wish to pursue it. It's entirely up to you. But there must be other ideas. I can't say that Basingstoke should be as poor as we possibly are. Now, just to clear 1 or 2 things, and I must say this, I sit here quite often, or regularly in council, and hear criticism levelled at the previous administration. You haven't done this. At the moment, the administration is telling us quite happy, and I welcome that it's the 5th year in a trot they haven't reduced council tax. Well, can I tell you that under the joint administration, we had 5 out of 7 years we never increased it, and in the 11 years we were in charge, we didn't increase it by 8 times. So we did very well. So when we start thinking, criticising about the previous administration, perhaps we should take a step back and look at the history. We are all here trying to improve the facilities within the council. We argue, we quite rightly argue. Arguing is healthy. As long as you're prepared under argument, perhaps to change your view. And I think that's been expressed tonight. A lot of things goes on within the borough I'm proud of, and a lot of things goes on within the borough I'm unhappy with. No doubt in my ward, Northern, we have a high percentage of people who are perhaps not well off. And every time we make a decision, we affect them entirely. And that's a concern. We've had a lot of emails come through lately about homelessness. What are we doing about it? And I think there's a lot more we can do to improve that. Not just sit back and say we're doing this. It's easy to say how much we're spending on things, but you must look at the impact. Can we perhaps do a bit different idea? Can we spend less, or should we spend more? I think in most cases we should look after the people who vote us in. We are elected members by our community. We listen to them and we should abide by what they say. In my community, with Laura and Paul, we are faced with problems all the time. And I think that needs to be addressed. So that when we talk about the budget,
1 more minute,
yes, the
Councillor.
budget in a sense needs to be improved. I can't support the budget. Some parts perhaps, but most parts no.
And I think we should step back and think about the people outside. One of the biggest achievements we've achieved in my time, we used to refer to the council as Basingstoke. We've actually referred to the council now as Basingstoke and Dean. And I think that was something which badly needed. So I've listened intently to the debate tonight. Some very good speakers, some just repeating what's been said before. And I think in most cases, certainly from this side, we speak with assurance that we are doing our best. If we were in charge, we would make all these differences. I think we are politicians. You're placed in that place of importance, and eminent things should happen, and we should look after each other. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hood. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I should be voting against this council plan and budget, and just want to make a few points to briefly explain why. I think it's a bit of a curate's egg. Let's be fair. It does have some good bits. And I'm pleased that the administration have, at long last, started to listen to what others say. Of course, that's where nearly all the good bits have come from. It's good that there are green initiatives in the budget. One relatively small sum to be spent on our own buildings to cut our costs, but it's needed, and it's better than nothing. Another relatively small sum to try and help improve our abysmal recycling rate, as Councillor Hood was just referring to. But please, I do hope, Mr. Mayor, that it's not going to be spent on another top-down initiative, because we need to go out and ask people what will help, what will encourage them to recycle. There's a third small pot of money earmarked to trial photovoltaics on council buildings. Well, as I said at the last council meeting, hooray. Of course, if the PV opportunity was taken up when we first suggested it, the council would already be earning money to help our revenue flow and already reducing the CO2 that we pump out into the local environment. And of course, there's the £1 million Green Investment Reserve, which I'll come back to in a moment. It's also good that there's £500,000 for the Community Support Fund. But, and this is the same as with the Green Investment Reserve, the proof of that pudding is going to be in the eating. We may sit here this evening and each have our own ideas of projects that they might support during the year. And in my mind, and obviously as we've heard in other people's minds in the council chamber, the CAB might need a good chunk of that community support fund, and quite probably neighbour care too. But we have no guarantees that they are going to get it. One word appears time after time in this budget: property. For example, look at the one-off revenue priority allocations. Strategic property project support, strategic property issues, property management costs, property, oh, and the civic campus, and then, yes, more property. And then there are the priority service enhancements, 7 items. One is the Community Support Fund, 5 small projects sharing £133,000, and a massive £213,000 that will go on, yes, you've guessed it, property. And please bear in mind that all of that Green Investment Reserve might just end up being spent on Basing View. In other words, even more money going on property. You see, Mr. Mayor, I think this is in essence symptomatic of what I think is wrong with this budget. It's too much about buildings and too little about people. Out of 1.8 million priority revenue allocations, over 1.2 million is about things. This council needs to look to the needs of the borough's people.
One more minute, Councillor, please.
Thank you. For housing, for local services, for sports opportunities, for somewhere to turn to when they have problems. No, I cannot support a budget that is all about things. We need a budget that is all about people.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And picking up on the subject of property that Councillor Baker referred to, creates the thought that it might be a useful thing for scrutiny to compare the very many millions that the council has spent on its properties over the year, and really to question whether the council has actually achieved value for money from that expenditure, given the significant number of buildings that remain empty and in some cases derelict. I wanted to really point out that this is a sad budget in many ways, because things that the Conservatives tried to do, they have failed. Things that they didn't want to do, they have achieved. And things that they ought to do, they have given up. And let me just give you a few examples. Things that they ought to have done but have given up on in practice. The issue of recycling. And there was a time that some people may recall that there was a thermometer, a 6-foot thermometer in the reception area of the Deans, which is no longer, of course, a reception area. And that was tracking the council's progress to what was at the time the 30% target for recycling. And at a particular point in time, the thermometer mysteriously disappeared. And I did ask, well, one can only hope that it was recycled, but and I did ask after what might have happened to it, but no answer was forthcoming. So let's just hope that this is one item that hasn't been recycled and still exists, and let's hope for its speedy reinstallation in the council's reception area. So that's one thing that ought to have been done, but the council has given up, the issue of recycling. Things that the administration tried to do but failed. It tried actually in reality to put a wall round the borough as far as planning policy was concerned, and to pretend that somehow no one could come in or out. But the council has now admitted, in the words of the leader, that it cannot put a wall round the borough, and that at least is something to be welcomed. Conservatives tried to oppose a great many housing sites, and I venture to suggest that for every single significant housing site in the borough, it has probably been opposed by a Conservative at some time. So they tried to do that, but now the administration say that it's wrong that housing sites are opposed everywhere, and that at least is a welcome dose of realism. And things that the council didn't want, but it has achieved. Sadly, it has achieved the planning on appeal, what the leader referred to as planning applications being determined at random on appeal. That is one achievement that the administration should be justly ashamed of. And there was a brief moment of amusement when I read the budget, and it was the reference in the budget to the £136,000 efficiency saving due to there being no elections. I, for one, hope that we will restore a bit of inefficiency in 2014, specifically through our elections, and hopefully achieve the right outcome of the Conservatives being chucked out on their ear.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A council's measured by two simple things: how much tax it collects and how it delivers its services. We've got a council plan tonight which will deliver yet another council tax freeze, and announcing yet another year of a council tax freeze. 5 years of the same council tax. The opposition tonight have said we have an obsession with freezing council tax. Yes, I make no apology for it. I'm quite happy to have an obsession for keeping residents' money with them and not taking it away from them. I'm quite happy to have an obsession of spending residents' money wisely. I'm quite happy to have an obsession for running an efficient council. Isn't it telling that the opposition think that that is wrong? But it's not just freezing council tax which makes us a good council and this a good plan. It's our high standard of council services. And how do we know they're high standard? Because our residents which pay for them tell us. They tell us in our satisfaction surveys that all councillors have been briefed on recently. And these services are supported by a high level of spending. As Councillor Gerard Warden has said, over 32 million. We have many successes, but I want to speak on the successes and the plans around the environment and climate change area. Recycling has been much mentioned today. This year we've introduced the glass recycling service, a new service opposed by the Labour Party. Of course, 4 years ago they were pro it. 4 years ago they were putting out leaflets saying they wanted it. Now they just attack it and then stand up and say we need to do more about recycling when they oppose the thing that has given us the largest increase in Hampshire for recycling. This council now recycles more dry recyclables than Eastleigh Borough Council, a council that for years has been held up as the greatest at recycling, a paragon of recycling. We've made great improvements, but we're carrying on and doing more. We're soon to launch a recycling service for small electrical items. We've launched the recycling service for the commercial, supporting local shops and businesses. Councillor Baker, who has a great passion around this area and a huge amount of knowledge, suggests that we should ask the people what stops them. An excellent idea. That's why the survey was commissioned several months ago and is being written now. We're planning more work with schools. I said at committee I wanted to tap into the pester power of children, so we really got it from the bottom up of how we could recycle better in this area. But to conclude on recycling, I want to quote the leader when he said, and if I can just note it down, one thing will not change, however, weekly bin collections will stay. That might disappoint some in this chamber, but it won't disappoint the residents of Basingstoke. Moving on to another area, water quality. Many members in this chamber and in committee have spoken with real passion about monitoring the water quality, and this administration has acted. We're launching, with the Environmental Agency, a monitoring plan of our water quality in the Loddon, which is a borough-wide issue, because wherever you flush, it goes into the Loddon. And it will give us the data to monitor new development. And I want to pay tribute to Councillor Marks, Councillor Still and Councillor Miller for really pushing me and the administration to do this. Street cleaning, Mr. Mayor. We have an excellent street cleaning, and it is appropriate at this that we pay tribute to our street cleaning teams, our environmental care teams, and our teams from Viola for doing a fantastic job during the snow. We can truly say that Basingstoke was open for business throughout. But they don't just do a great job in extreme weather, they carry on doing a great job delivering clean streets for this borough. And we're improving the service even more. We're improving it by introducing street cleaning. I said last year, Mr. Mayor, as I wrap up, and this debate's been rather similar. The Mayor, the leader, has proposed a plan. The Labour Party hasn't proposed a plan, has been negative, and Councillor James has entertained us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
For the protesters, I do usually allow people to finish their sentence. The next speaker, Councillor Washbourne.
Mr. Mayor, everyone wants their children and grandchildren to have an affordable place to live. but the outlook for people trying to find homes in Basingstoke is not good. The average age of a first-time buyer is now nearly 40, and single people can be on the housing register for over 15 years. We currently have nearly 7,000 people on the council housing register, with an affordable housing strategy target to build 300 affordable units a year for them to move into. So far, only 31 affordable units have been delivered in the last year. This is disgraceful. Wages between 2002 and 2011 increased by 22%, but rents have increased by 44%, and average house prices increased by 53%. New homes should be affordable to those who need them, environmentally friendly and providing good amenities to allow communities to grow. We will build homes either by direct capital investment or by enabling funds for housing associations and preferred partner developers to deliver what we need. We will also establish 2 pilot schemes, one rural and one urban, for a cooperative housing social enterprise. Using the council's land and money, we hope to find innovative ways that involve communities in finding solutions to the housing crisis they face. This administration has reserves of 150 million, currently only earning 2% interest. If this money was to be invested into building social housing, the potential long-term income could be 5%. With nearly 7,000 people on the housing register and thousands more who aspire to own their own homes, developers need to be building homes that people can afford. And at the moment, most housing built in Basingstoke and Deane is too expensive or is bought by buy-to-let landlords who operate a bloated market rental system. We would change the housing mix policy in the local plan to a target of 40% affordable housing, 30% of which would be socially rented housing, and 10% intermediate / shared ownership. With a generation priced out of home ownership, renting is the only choice for a growing number of people. But over 80% of families on the housing register are unable to afford the rent for a 3 or 4 bedroom property in the borough without housing benefit. Recent figures show that the number of people receiving housing benefit in the borough has increased from 6,600 to 9,400 between November 2008 and August 2012. Nationally, 417,000 more working people are now reliant on housing benefit to help pay private rents. This is an 86% increase in 3 years. Housing and other costs have risen faster than household incomes. Fixed-term tenancies have been introduced, and an extra 0.5 billion a year will be gathered from under-occupying tenants' pockets from April this year. As Labour councillors, our priority would be to build socially rented homes. More needs to be done to ensure our children and grandchildren have somewhere affordable to live. As one of the richest councils in the country, it is right and proper, prudent and financially sound that we should use council-owned land and money to find solution to the crisis we find ourselves. I feel this budget and the council plan does little in real terms to provide affordable housing for Basingstoke and Deane, and I cannot support it.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Frankham.
Thank you. I want to talk about a subject that's not been one word tonight. But before I do that, because I've been sitting here getting really quite cross, with all the talk about the homes and we've got to build the homes, yes, we have. I agree. But I'd just like to point out to certain members across the way there that have been saying about all the objections. Think about how many Popley have taken, 1,500 so far, and there is a plan that's going to, at the moment, on the Merton Rise, that there's no objection because it's the right time, it's the right place. Kiln Farm isn't, just bear that in mind. Because if we've not objected in the past, and we are objecting now. There must be sound, good reasons. But now to the subject I'd like to talk about. I have not heard one word about cycling. There are two things in the council plan on cycling: a picture on of a couple on the front page, and a vague commitment to recycling, but nothing to back up cycling. Considering the green agenda that the leader has signed up to and was unveiled in the Gazette over the last couple of weeks, I would have thought the Tories would have something to say on cycling. There is no funding mentioned, no new cycle pass, no, nothing at all. We could increase the access to the town centre and the station. We could survey and check where the inaccessible and possibly unsafe parts in the existing routes, and check the areas that don't really go to anywhere useful. This is not just me saying, this is backed by the cyclists and group who represent them in Basingstoke. If we want to get people out of their cars and into green transport, we have to think about cycling as well as public transport. Prior to the Tories gaining control in the Borough Council, there was much talk about creating cycle paths with a view to a comprehensive cycle network in Basingstoke. What happened? Cycles are a much more environmentally friendly way to get around town and have the added advantage of health benefits through exercise. Unfortunately, the Tories seem to be more interested in car ownership and don't appear to care too much about cycling. We will develop a new supplemental planning document specifically focused on cycling in Basingstoke and how the council can better enable safe and increased use of cycles as a good green form of transport. This would lead to a programme of joining the cycle routes through the town and a strategic, bigger picture, an approach to insensitivity on safe cycle use. This is yet another example of where we are different from the Tories. I'll finish up with one last comment. Where is the help in this council, in any form, to get on your bike, as a famous ex-Tory told us to do?
Councillor Frankham, you could have had twice as long on that. Councillor Gary Watt. Councillor Gary Watt.
Not too close, Sean. Yes, thank you. Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This isn't a budget with a lack of money. It's a budget with a lack of ideas and ambition, yet a never missed opportunity within the borough. I mean, I was going to speak about affordable homes and the top of town, but I'm exhausted and I've already heard good speeches on those subjects, so I'll try and move on to things that we ain't heard about already. The new homes bonus. We received our first payment nearly 2 years ago. This council is due to receive up to 15 million in the next few years. What has this council done? It's earmarked 600,000 for the Black Dam roundabout with other partners, and it's stuck away 80% into reserves. Mr. Mayor, what the council have done something actually. We've got our first MAP meeting next Monday with that new homelessness money which we discussed. 2 years of no action. This money isn't ring-fenced. It could be used for in growth within the borough, in all wards, affecting all residents. Then we come to the green infrastructure, Mr. Mayor. I know members have talked about it, but we're creating another reserve of £1 million. My fear in a year's time, we'll still be talking about it, what to do with this money. It's all very well and good signing up to the Green Gazette initiative for the town, but what are we doing? I mean, we're just renaming a reserve budget. I mean, we need some action. I expect they'll probably set up another MAP committee to look at what we're going to do. I mean, the leader and the deputy leader have hinted that we're going to revamp Basingview and turn it into a green business park. I mean, I have seen no plans for a green business park. I haven't seen any proposals for combined technologies or PV solar powers. I mean, all I've seen, I went up Basingview recently, all I saw was a couple of buildings knocked down, and a couple of green shrubs. I mean, that isn't a green strategy. I've been back on this council for 18 months, and I've seen no firm proposals for Basingview turning it into a green business park. And it's been touched on by other members about what we're doing to improve our green credentials around the town. I mean, in this particular council plan, you've earmarked 3 council buildings that are going to have PV solar panels on. I mean, you've been in power for 6-7 years. That's a pretty poor show, Mr. Mayor. I'm tired. I mean, you've had years to be more efficient and more green, and you've failed, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I wasn't going to get into a political...
I did my best.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'll sit down now. No, I won't. I wasn't going to get into a political debate with some of my colleagues across the road, but I've been provoked, Mr. Mayor. As Goebbels said, if you tell a big enough lie enough times, the people will believe it, and I believe the Deputy Leader is actually believing some of their propaganda. The welfare budget is actually going up. The deficit is actually going up. These are real facts. It's not the Labour government's fault, it's the Tory government's fault. And we don't talk the borough down. I'm afraid your actions take the borough down. Just look at the judicial review on Manydown. It wasn't the Labour group, it wasn't the Liberal group, it was the actions of the Tory group not listening to common sense. So this budget reminds me of a 1980s pop group called Talk Talk. But Mr. Mayor, Talk Talk were quite good. Unfortunately, this budget isn't very good, so I hope we all vote against it. Thank you.
The last speaker, Councillor Raphael.
Mr. Mayor, listening to the Labour group leader's speech was a little like listening to a funeral oration where no one had died. Let me, through you, Mr. Mayor, reassure the Labour group that Basingstoke-on-Deane is very much alive, it is thriving, it's well respected and it's well liked by those who live in the borough, by us, and by those who live outside the borough. Mr. Mayor, if the Labour group could stop preaching misery for one moment, they could probably help us make the borough even better. Instead, Mr. Mayor, they have suggested no answers on how many new homes should be built in the local plan. They have suggested no answers on where the new homes should be built in the local plan. They have suggested no answers on whether the council tax should be frozen, cut or increased. They have suggested no answers on whether the existing service savings should be made or not made. No, Mr. Mayor, it's just misery and more misery from them. They talk about Mr. McCorber, but from them it is all Uriah Heep. Mr. Mayor, let me turn to the Liberal Democrats. Mr. Mayor, we learned today that if you want to get a straight answer from a Liberal Democrat, then you don't ring them up on the telephone. Apparently they only like to answer questions face to face. We heard from the Liberal Democrats today, Mr. Mayor, about a green leisure park, and can I say I'm sure the Conservatives will look very carefully at what they're suggesting and give it all proper consideration. Well, they've mentioned about building low-cost housing. Again, we'll give it proper consideration, but they might find it slightly harder to persuade us on that one. And can I thank through you, Mr. Mayor, the leader of the Liberal Democrats for acknowledging that we do listen to the Liberal Democrats when they come up with a sensible idea. Mr. Mayor, the leader of the Liberal Democrats made many, many good points about the Labour Party. In particular, of course, it's only when you see Labour in government, locally or nationally, that you realise how incompetent they are, and it's worth us being reminded of that regularly, and I encourage him to keep doing so. Of course, Mr. Mayor, he made many, many points, and I should just remind him, we know it is dangerous for a Liberal Democrat to have too many points. Well, I was going to say, we know what points mean, don't we? Points mean prison, yes. Mr. Mayor, the people of Basingstoke and Dean have told us that they want their council to be well run, and they have told us that it is being well run. Indeed, it is probably one of the best well run councils in the country. Mr. Mayor, inevitably all, and I mean all of us, get things wrong. And quite clearly, we have got some things wrong. We have said we are sorry for that, and we remain sorry for those things that we have got wrong. But we have got a lot right, and we are rightly proud of what we have got right. And this budget and plan will keep this borough a thriving success. And it is my belief that this administration can claim some of the credit for making this borough the success that it is. And so I recommend it to this chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Raphael. Councillor Sanders to wind up.
It's never a good thing to follow Councillor Raphael, I can assure you. So I shall be very brief, Mr. Mayor. The objectives of the council plan and budget are very simple. They're to ensure that our residents have a high quality of life, good jobs and a prosperous future. And the actions proposed tonight deal with the pressing issues of today by pumping an additional £2 million into providing support for those in difficult economic times, for dealing with parking and access issues, and giving a kickstart to green initiatives. At the same time, the capital budget for the plan has been increased by 50% to over 30 million to ensure that we do plan and invest with ambition for the future, to provide a thriving and prosperous environment in which to live. A vote against the plan tonight is a vote against supporting the most vulnerable people in our community. It's a vote against helping people with their parking problems. It's a vote against introducing more and more green initiatives. And by the sound of it, it's also a vote against having the anvil. We'll see it closed fairly soon. The council must provide value for money for our residents. We must provide the right services in the right way at the right cost. That means keeping council tax low, so there'll be no change for yet another 2 years, making a period of 5 years in all. It means listening to our communities and delivering the services that meet local needs. And it also means listening to other ideas within the chamber. So it's very sad that some people want to disparage the idea when they want to talk about having collective government, to disparage the idea of having working parties, to get ideas out onto the table. I'd very happily work with anybody who's got good ideas. It means, however, also making the best use of our council assets and attracting external investment, because we cannot do it all on our own. Despite the funds that we have, they will not be enough. And finally, it means finding new ways of working with our partners to save money and improve our performance. We should never be complacent and think, if we are good, and I think we may well be good, that we're good enough. The recent ICM poll of residents clearly showed that they had faith in this council to deliver. More than 90% were happy with the local area where they lived. It's our responsibility to keep it that way and make living here an even better place for the future. This budget and this plan and the plan behind it are designed to do exactly that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Order, please. Thank you, Councillor. Right, we now move to a vote, and as I said earlier, in two separate parts now. Page 3 of our agenda, item 9, the first item under
reports to council, which is the proposals for the policy and budget framework. May I see those in favour, please?
Thank you. We're happy, yep. Yep.
Thank you. Those against? That's carried, but we're just being thorough. Oh, sorry, Councillor Day, you're tired. Thank you. 32-27 was the vote. Now on to the second part, the council plan. Those in favour? Yes. Yeah, I've been reminded this is incorporating the amendment proposed by Councillor Golding, which was just to tidy up a slight error on the minutes that the committee chairman is happy with, and I am. So those in favour of the council plan, please show as amended, very slightly. And those against? Looks like 32-27. Thank you very much for that. The next item is the Treasury Management Strategy. Councillor Isaac to introduce.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the Treasury Management Strategy for 2013-14. The current strategy of where we invest our cash resources has served the council well for the last 7 years. But the prevailing position and outlook for interest rates and inflation have combined to require us to re-examine our strategy if we are to achieve the returns we need to in order to keep our council tax low. A report recommending the way forward will be coming to ARGA and Cabinet in February. In the meantime, this report proposes a widening of the range of investment instruments allowable under our authorised parameters. These, however, will not be applied until the separate strategy review has been agreed.
You're therefore moving it, I guess.
Indeed I am, Mr. Mayor.
Those in favour?
Seconder.
Oh, sorry, seconder indeed, sorry. Yeah, rushing there. Councillor Sanders, thank you. I've not seen any hands for a debate, but I mean, if you must, but... Right, okay, those in favour? Yeah, and against?
26.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's carried, clearly. The next item is the staff pay award. That hasn't come from a committee, that's come from a report of the Chief Executive. So I move that that be accepted. Right. With that, I also note that we're more or less 9:30, so I'd like to suggest the suspension of standing orders, which hopefully will not mean much prolongation. Thank you. So the next thing is to receive and determine recommendations, of which we have none. The same with notices under motion. Notice of motion under FCPR 3.16, of which we have none. What about 10? That's what.
Right, yes. We've missed the Mabel Payne recommendation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the original printed agenda. You're quite right.
No, well done.
We have a recommendation from Cabinet. It should be in the papers attached, page 3620. Is that going to be moved by Councillor Sanders? Oh, sorry. Councillor Sherlock. Okay. Somebody?
I'm very happy to move it as on the papers.
Find a seconder. Councillor Sherlock. If he feels moved to, he can, but you're perfectly at liberty to
ask to speak and say you're disappointed not to have received one. But beyond that, if Councillor Sherlock's not moved to move one, that's his business. Right. Moved and seconded. No speakers that I can see. Those in favour? Against? Right. Fine. That's passed. So I said 11. Item 11, there's none anyway. Item 12. None. Wait a minute. 12. Just a minute. No. No, there's nothing else there. Right. Now we move to the committee minutes en bloc. If there are people wishing to contribute to that, I'd like to know on what pages. Councillor Watts.
So supplementary pages, housing environment overview, and it's just general comment on the, well, 361. 3611, sorry. And it's just a comment on the general minutes, the inaccuracies.
Is this a question
Well,
or comment?
It will be a question.
It will, that's fine. Yeah, you
eventually.
just said, I want to make a comment, I think, or something like that. So.
Is there a chairman aware there's no notes in the minutes or in the comments about the vote that was taken on the night where all 5 members of the opposition voted against these new green standards, and the vote on the night was tied and it went through on your casting vote? Do you think that should be recorded in these minutes?
You might feel it's an important point, but it's not something that we normally record in that fashion. It's either won or lost. Well, because it's not something that is normally recorded. I mean, okay, you can answer, but it's not something that we normally record. Right? There's no wish to answer it, and there's no obligation to answer it. A supplementary to something that's not been answered. It's a bit unusual. Let's just go on. Why not?
Mr. Mayor, if he wants to hear my voice, you can hear my voice. The way I understand minute taking, lost motions are not recorded.
Well, that's not altogether the case, but certainly we don't record if it was decided on the chair's vote. I've never seen that done, and I don't think it's a practice that we've followed. Supplementary, Councillor Watts.
Does Councillor Marks think going forward that would be a good idea to add those sort of things to the minutes?
That is a question, Councillor Marks. You may or may not answer it.
I believe separate to these minutes, there is a discussion going on with some committee regarding minute taking, and perhaps that should go to that committee to look at in greater detail.
Thank you, Councillor Marks. That's a fine answer. Councillor Cubitt, a question, yes? A question?
The question is that one of our very senior officers has agreed to the Audit and Governance Committee that the minutes will change and revert back to the way they were, and therefore would not confirm that consequently, as a result of those affirmations from a senior officer, that the motion that was lost should be recorded.
Sorry. To whom is that a question? To whom is that a question, though I think it has been rightly...
Ask it to the Chief Executive then, actually.
No, sorry.
No, because in the audit... No, this is very serious. In the audit, we were given very damning analysis of our minute taking.
Councillor Cubitt, please be seated. Right. I believe that Councillor Marks gave what was, as it happens, the right answer. It's not his orbit to be talking particularly about what is being proposed in another committee, but that's quite right that it's being considered, and certainly it's not our procedure to question the Chief Executive anyway. So, Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At that meeting of Housing and Environment, the opposition supported a motion that I put forward that said that we didn't support the standard of housing. Is it should it not really be the case that this should have been recorded? We had a cabinet member come along and say he's listening. We have a position where we have a standard that was being recommended. It's going to reduce the standard of open space in this borough. People are going to have to walk rather than 5 minutes, they're going to have to work 10 minutes.
Developing into a speech.
No, it's not, Mr. Mayor. What I'm saying is we're having a reduction in open space. Therefore, surely, as opposition, we should have our motion, as we asked, to be recorded.
I don't disagree with the sentiments, but at the moment it is being considered to be doing it in a formalised fashion. The chair of the committee has the opportunity to answer again, since the question has been put to you, if you wish.
I refer to the answer I gave earlier. A motion was put forward and lost, a second motion was put forward and carried, and I believe that's the motion recorded.
Right. Councillor Golding, on this same topic, is it? On this, I mean, not the same topic, but these same minutes, at least. Right. Just, there is the opportunity. Let me remind members, when the committee next meets, one can request that be entered into the minutes at that stage, and that opportunity is there, and it's up to the committee to decide how it handles it. Right, Councillor Golding, which one are you on?
Just in case it's necessary for the minutes, the record, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask the leader to confirm that he agrees with the change I suggested earlier to the cabinet minutes, so that they can be altered.
I understood him to have accepted it by not complaining before.
Of course I do, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, leader. Right. Right, does that mean to say we've dealt with all the minutes? It sounds splendid. Right, okay, thank you for that. Which brings us to the end of our agenda tonight. Thank you for... sorry, just a minute before we all stand up. Councillor James, thank you. I did want to say thank you for, on the whole, a very well conducted and reasonably well-spirited debate, and thank you for that. It's one of my easiest council meetings so far, I guess. Thank you very much, colleagues, and have a safe journey home.